screen over here to the left. We're going to go ahead and do the official, proper introduction.
How's my video look?
Still a
It's
circle.
still spinning. It's a spinning circle. All right, guys, we're ready to go live with CoCoTALK After Dark, number 12. So I'm ready. The question is, are you guys ready?
Yep.
Sure. Then let's do it.
CoCoTALK After Dark. CoCoTALK After Dark.
That's right. When you just can't get enough of old guys talking about old things, we do it twice in one day. Welcome to episode 11 of CoCoTALK After Dark. All right. There we are.
Did Rick have a beer?
He did.
Yep.
Oh, my.
I'm having a pina colada.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen... Well, no, I take it back. CoCo... no, Tandy Assembly, I did.
Rick, are you over 21?
I believe so.
All right. Well, Eric, there's something going on with your camera. It's spinning. It's not coming through. You must be using a Boyson technology webcam. That's probably the problem right there.
For sure.
So here we are. It is episode 11. We've got 10 people watching us already, and we've just started this train wreck already. So
All right.
how about we start off? There he is. There's Eric. Hey.
Hey.
It's like an old. It's like a.
Closed Discord. Apparently, it interferes.
But are you moving?
Yep.
Yeah, you're not moving. That's okay.
okay.
Maybe it's a still image. But it's kind of like the old TVs. My old TV, when I first turned it on, it took a long time for the picture to come completely into focus, So it's retro.
Stevie, you cannot forget the telethon
Yes.
for our buttons down there.
That's right. So if you're watching us live on Facebook, you can definitely contribute to our emoji-thon here and fuel the emoji meter. So you can give us a like, a love, a haha, a wow, a sad, or an angry. And we are raising money with each positive emotion that we receive. Timmy does have a chance of getting a wheelchair. So no promises. But
Hey, if we get a few angries, I'll even donate in on that.
all right. We do have an angry already. All right. So Timmy, you might be having to hoof it.
And happy Father's Day, whoever our father's here.
That is true. Yeah, we just lost Moke Overholser too, so hopefully he'll come back. So depending on what part of the country you're in, if you're already in the future, it may be Father's Day for you. For us in the present in the United States, because that's where everything matters. It's not quite Father's Day yet, so.
No, I have a feeling for some of you, by the time we finish the podcast, it'll be after Father's Day.
Not me.
And for some reason, I'm not getting the live chat.
Eric's moving.
Yeah.
Hey.
So this is weird. I'm not getting the right live chat. It's just oy vey. All right, you guys talk amongst yourselves. I need to try to fix something real quick because the live chat thing that's on my sidebar here in the live feed, it's not picking up now. It's not picking up Nick Marotta, where he said, did you guys get that? Did I miss that? I don't know. So we did get Tom C saying, hello, Mark. But Nick Marotta just said, hey, I'm an old guy who likes old things, but I'm not seeing it in the feed here. Now, Richard just says, I just changed mine to sad, but I think that's coming through on Facebook. So I don't know if I'm seeing everything from YouTube, but listen, I can't do it all. All right, it is what it is. So this is our show. We do this show called CoCoTALK, and then sometimes we do it again, and we do it later in the evening. So brilliantly, we then call this CoCoTALK After Dark. Technically, it's during dark, right? Because if it was after dark, then it would be light. So this is CoCoTALK at night, but CoCoTALK After Dark just sounds awesome. Like there should be strippers here or something.
Well, how many here have wives who are encouraging you to go on tonight?
How many have wives that are
encouraging? I don't think that's the right word to describe my wife.
Not the bird you're going for.
She's over here tapping her foot saying, "Get done with the show so we can go do something."
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is a sacrifice of our time to be here, but thank you all for being here. So, second show on Monday.
Our relationship.
Yeah. Let's acknowledge who we have on the panel so far. We have with us, not always with us live, but always with us in spirit. Eric Canales is with us today. Hello, Eric. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
And you are in the greater Chicago area-ish, right? You're somewhere near Glenside and CoCo Fest.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. This would not be an episode of CoCoTALK if we did not have our resident token foreigner on the panel. And so the token non-American today is being played by Brian Joyce of Australia. G'day, Brian.
G'day. It's only until Nick turns up.
We are an equal opportunity offender. We like to get everybody.
I did yell out the window to him to say it's on.
Yell out the window.
Just waiting for him to hear it.
Yeah, he's your neighbor. So just put a note on a boomerang and throw it out there. He'll get it.
Thanks a lot for the sound of travel.
And we have Mr. Handsome himself, Grant Leighty. What's going on, Grant?
Good day, everybody, or good night, I should say.
And you're in Kansas City area, right, Grant?
That is correct.
All right. We have the Timberman himself all the way from Arizona. Ron Delvaux is with us.
How you doing,
Oh, no.
From sunny Southern California, Mr. Steve Bjork joins us. Hello, Steve.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Hey, we're overcast today, so we're not so sunny.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Last but certainly not least, but we know Richard just joined us too. But we also have another celebrity in our midst. But the president of RSK, Dick Adams, is with us. Hey, Richard. Thank you. You're too kind.
Is that man up there playing bomb threat?
It looks like he is, Eric. All right. And then just joining us on the panel, Mr. Richard Lorbieski of Boyson Technology, all the way from Texas, Florida. Texas, United States, anyways. Right?
Texas, Florida.
Texas, Florida.
Yeah.
What the hell do I know?
Yeah, you don't know your geography. That's okay. But I'm here under protest, so whatever.
Hey, Richard.
Yes.
Screw you.
Oh, okay. Screw you back.
Oh, you sound nice.
Well, it's a family show. We would say
Sounds like After Dark.
Yeah. So, I would like to say, I think, can we chat through Facebook? So here, Nick Marotta just showed up. Now you're showing up, Nick. That's weird. Okay. Yeah, you can chat through Facebook. You can chat through here. Your chat just showed up, though, so it's weird. It's kind of this hit or miss thing. I also have to keep turning my head to the left, getting whiplash every now and then, making sure I'm seeing what's going on YouTube as well. Yeah. So, yeah, I would like to say that I think today's show was a pretty good show, and I think CoCo Forever is a pretty cool project.
Yeah, and I'm ready for episode 4, so he needs to hurry up and get that out.
Yeah, I didn't have time to listen. I didn't have time for anything after this. My wife has decided that she wants to, well, my daughter too. We're painting my younger daughter's room. And so as soon as this show ended, I was helping my wife move everything out of that room. Not everything, but most of everything. So by tomorrow, the room will be gutted, and then she's going to start painting it. So a little summer project, right? So we had time to
painting the bathroom like somebody else is.
Yeah. Well, that was Nick earlier, right? Nick said he had
Nick.
Yeah.
Painting the crapper.
Yeah.
Painting the crapper.
I told him paint it brown. That's color.
Good times. All right, so we're going to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about tonight. It doesn't have to be the CoCo, but obviously we can. But anything else you want to talk about in your lives, in the world of retro, in the world of tech, movies, we'll just make this free form.
No, we also have to blow your mind, remember?
We
got that first assembly language lesson for you.
Are we going to do that tonight?
Yeah, we're going to do that tonight.
All right.
I want to blow your brain.
All right, I'm going to listen. I'm not going to type anything, but if you want to start preaching the gospel, I will listen. Mm-hmm. You'll get an amen out of me.
I have a machine language disc here that I'm taking. Now I can program.
did you just eat a silicon wafer?
Yes.
It's a very thin wafer.
I can now program.
Yeah, the only problem is it was a brown wafer.
Right.
Oh no!
Same color as the map.
All that implies.
Were you anywhere near Curtis's bathroom repair or Nick's toilet painting?
Hit the color right.
Brown wafer.
It's a very thin wafer.
It's an MC-10.
Oh, okay. So Tom C says, I like the new portrait of Richard. It is oddly accurate. The old the grumpy old
Richard,
man.
Speaking of Richard, congratulations on the new website.
Oh, thank you. I need to add some more stuff to it.
You can call him Statler now.
Is there a link
Yep.
for returns on there yet?
No, that's I need to add that. It's goforretro.com.
We have almost one of every emotion right now, so we are definitely emotionally balanced for the most part. We've got one of all emotions. Nobody's been wowed yet by this, but we have a few. We've angered and saddened a few. We've ha-ha'd, and we got some loves. We got some like. So we're kind of very well balanced here emotionally, which is more than I can say for us in real life.
I'm trying to get the underwhelmed emotion. I can't find it.
Yeah.
There's the one that says Dillagaff, right? So what did we not talk about today after CoCo Forever? Is there anything else that was burning on the heels for anyone to really want to share and get out there?
Well, I've started doing some testing on the some software for the CoCo Flash.
Okay.
So not much to update on that yet. Just started on it here yesterday. So in fact, I'll probably send you an email with the link and everything.
Now,
Okay.
what
What type
Steve
of
wants
testing?
to know is how do you stay enthused to keep programming with that? Talk to him, Steve.
How do you stay motivated there, Greg?
How do I stay more motivated? Well, you just take it baby steps each day.
Yeah.
It's
So let me
actually-
ask.
it's not programming. I'm just testing it out, following the instructions, and I'll be honest with you. CoCo Flash is a lot more difficult than I expected because it is not an easy task at all. And I think even you found that out too, Steve, right?
Well, this is as far as I got. I looked at the documentation, which I rarely do, but I actually did. I read what's the old saying? RTFM, read the fine manual. But yeah, so I read the documentation, and it doesn't read easy to a non-assembly language programmer. I mean, honestly, if you need to kind of understand assembly and memory addressing to understand that's how I look at it anyways. Hopefully I'm wrong, but there's a lot of memory space on this CoCo Flash, and you have to load binary images somewhere into memory. What I think would be really helpful is something like some type of firmware program, like a BIOS or something that booted up that would tell you, how many blocks are available, what blocks are in use, what ranges are open, and maybe even show you something visually, like, you've got so many slots and just color code the slots that are in use and what slots aren't in use. And like maybe one of those old like DOS level defrag programs where you saw the little squares as the hard drive was getting defragged.
Right.
But something that is kind of mentally aware of what's physically going on in there and assisting you in populating that space. So it's seems like it's very much a DIY process right now that I can't quite wrap my brain around.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And like I said, we're working on it, and hopefully we'll make it an ease of use project. But yeah, I totally agree with you because it even gets more confusing when we get to 32K and 128K and 512K. It's just it's very
bank
confusing.
switching ROMs, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
I guess
What you're dealing with is you need just like on a floppy drive, you've got a directory structure, you got all that stuff. It's basically storage management system. That's what you really need to put in. Everybody has to agree this is what we're going to do. And we'll use the first part of the CoCo Flash to be the allocation table, essentially. And then everything after that runs based on that allocation.
Right. I know. There's X number of blocks. I think there is certain things that are already pre-reserved for the self-booting code, but it almost should be something similar to that, where the first block is the firmware that always boots up, that makes it self-aware. The second block would be like a rewritable configuration file, because this is not necessarily ROM, even though it's emulating ROM. It is rewritable, and as you add more content to the flash, you need to be able to update the config file. And so maybe another dedicated block for that, where, and so here's, I don't know how hard this would be, but would there be a way, because there is a finite number of ROM cartridges as far as legacy titles. Would there be some type of way to come up with a checksum where you could verify what ROM cartridge this is, because this block matches that checksum that's in our lookup table, and we know that it's game XYZ? Does that make sense?
So
instead of having to hand key in the descriptions for all the titles, since there's fairly finite, it could be like auto sensing. Let me just scan through memory. Let me look for the checksums. Let me see what titles are out there. Compare those against a database of known CoCo cartridges, and then I'll pre-populate your menu, and then you can choose how you want to see it. Do you want to see it alphabetical? Do you want to see it by publisher? Do you want to see it, by genre? Maybe this is like over ambitious for what is achievable in, small amount of RAM. But I think that would be kind of cool, because, the CoCo SDC, that Explorer, is, it's kind of spoiled us in a way.
Well, part of the thing is, look at what they did on the internet for your CDs.
Yep.
You take your CD, put it in there, and you go. But the key was, they were going to the internet for the database.
Right. We don't have that. Right.
No, not necessarily. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with DriveWire.
DriveWire, TTL.
Yep, exactly.
RS-232.
You got it. Yep.
ESP.
I mean, it is not hard to put on a server a database of something like this.
Yeah.
You just got to make sure it stays there. Well,
right.
It could be on Glennside's web server, for example.
Yep. Or at the Color Computer Archive. This has to be in a file you know how to get to.
Yep. Yeah, FTP it or something. Not a bad idea. But I think it might be helpful, since there are a finite number of known cartridges, to have that database built into the unit, so it'll do the heavy lifting on all those for you. But I've fired mine up, and the ones that are on there, they load very quickly, and I like that. I like the instant loading.
Well, we do a 32-bit CRC of the ROM, and we'll come up with something that's got, 32-bit. Chances are we won't come up with two ROMs that are the same CRC.
Right. All right. So these are like some brainstorming sessions we can have with people who actually know how to now achieve that. I can believe it, but I need somebody else to help me achieve it. I want to believe.
So it's not a CoCo project, but it probably will be.
Yes. And Rick Adams, what are we looking at here?
Just my work in progress. I meant to make way more progress on this weekend than I am making, but because I've been mowing my lawn and things like that, out in a heat advisory.
I noticed earlier, too, when I was talking about speakers and stereo, you were also showing, too. Did you have your right speaker on the left side of your monitor?
Yes. That was what I was showing you.
Yeah, shame on you. Shame on you, Rick.
The knob is on the left, right, and then the one without the knob is on the right.
Yes.
So, yeah, I never...
A lot of people do that because it's just convenient for wiring, the way the wires reach.
Let me see if it says L and R on the speakers, and if I really do have them reversed.
It doesn't make a difference.
Screw you, Greg. Screw you, Greg.
You're right. It's reversed. L is on the right. Yes. No, it does make a difference. I just didn't realize that I had L on the right.
Hey, when you play first-person shooters, you got to have the speakers right, or else.
Absolutely.
Hey, where did he come from? I thought he was over there.
Right.
Right.
Over there.
You hear the noise on the right, you turn to the right and get shot from behind.
Yep. Yeah, before YouTube and stuff, and because now you have to do everything on headphones, I used to actually have surround sound. So I had the rear speakers where I could hear footsteps coming up behind me and all kinds of stuff. And
don't you get scared?
I do. And that's when I painted the toilet.
Jesus.
What color was that?
Oh God, please! I'm eating, guys.
Is this one of those
eating right now?
Is this one of those bring me my brown pants jokes?
Yes.
Stevie's got the Hershey squirts.
Oh dear God.
Bring me my red shirt. Yeah.
So Grant is, and I think Jim was enlisting some input on this at CoCo Fest. He was mentioning it to a few people, and he was showing off a few other products that have a good user interface. So Jim is definitely enlisting the support of people to help bring a UI to that product, and I think that'll really make this a holy grail product. I think for what it does, you know. And what is it? 8 megabytes of flash storage.
Yeah, I believe so.
8 megabytes, and the average cartridge, other than a handful of them, but the CoCo 1 and 2 cartridges, those were all mostly 8 kilobyte ROMs, right? 8K ROMs.
Right.
So theoretically, this has the capacity of 1,000 cartridges. And there's probably not more than 100 and change cartridges from the dawn of history to everything since.
Well, see, a lot of the early cartridges, I put out even one cartridge that was a K&a-half.
Oh, because the CoCo 1 was 4K. So were there 4K ROMs?
Well, it's not a question of how much memory you had. It was like, what could the program put in? And you got a better royalty the smaller your ROM was.
Because the manufacturing cost went down.
Exactly.
No.
And then later, the cost went down. And they also started doing chip-on-board technology where the ROM was actually glued onto the board. The wires were connected like they would do when they're making a chip out of it. They would make wires connect to the circuit board, and then they put a little drop of epoxy on it. This was originally started for things like Atari 2600. And Tandy picked up on that, so they had a bunch of them that came out that way. Then when the ROMs got larger, they stopped doing that. They went back to a ROM chip.
Gotcha. Nick Marotta, we can see you. You're here. Richard Lorbieski says the feature that the CoCo Flash needs is a return label. That's a scumbag thing to say, but we'd expect nothing less from Troll Jr. So here's my dumb question. I think I asked this before, but I'm so dumb I forgot the answer. Does the CoCo read directly from ROM space, like it's its own memory address space like RAM is?
Yes.
Okay, so when you pop in that ROM, the software is being read and processed and executed from the memory addresses in the ROM cartridge itself.
Exactly. There's no translation going on.
So in essence, ROM is actually adding RAM to the CoCo in a sense?
Well, it's adding space.
Memory.
Yeah, because you're not having to take the program and stick it in your limited RAM. You're basically expanding the space.
If you had a 32K CoCo, that cartridge is going to go in the area above the 32K, so it's not going to take up any of your 32K RAM.
Okay. So the program execution that's happening in ROM is actually being processed from the memory addresses of the ROM cartridge. However, like there's certain things have to exist in RAM. For example, like variables and your high score and your X and Y coordinates. So then some things
Rapid
do.
screen.
Okay. All right.
Now the thing is, on a CoCo 1 and 2, the maximum size of the space, ROM space, was 16K.
Okay. And then the default ROM space for the CoCo 3 was 32K, correct?
Actually, no. It was still 16K, but there was things you could adjust in the register to go up to 32K as full access space. And most of my CoCo 3 cartridges did use that full 32K of space. In the case of Arkanoid, which had CoCo 1 and 2 mode in addition to 3, all the CoCo 1 and 2 stuff was in that 16K that a CoCo 1 and 2 could see, And then I put all the CoCo 3 stuff in the extra 16K that only the CoCo 3 could see.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Hey, we got Jim Gerrie on camera. I don't think any of us have ever seen what Jim Gerrie looks like. Jim Gerrie, are you an actual human being or are you a Borg?
I don't know if my camera's working very well.
Yeah, well, we see you. You are you're actual flesh and blood. You're a human.
What's that shirt say?
You run out programs like a machine.
What does that shirt say?
Something about it's a Tetris shirt or something like that.
Yeah.
Just it says "Peace Different."
Cool.
Oh, I thought it said "Long live the MC-10," but I'm mistaken.
There are no shirts like that yet. I look forward to that.
I understand somebody's working on that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, where do you live? I know you're somewhere in Canada, right? Or are you?
Yeah, I'm on an island off the east coast called Cape Breton.
Now, that's one of the English-speaking ones. It's not like Quebec, right? Or Quebec.
Well, we speak English, Mi'kmaq, Gaelic, and French here.
Oh, really?
Wow.
We have Acadians here, yeah.
Interesting.
Wow. You got all kinds of languages there. So you're you're semi-fluent in the French too?
Oh, yes.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Cool.
Oh, Paul Friscarello says he might try to join us after the kids go to sleep. That's cool, Paul. Here's a dumb question, and maybe some of you guys can answer this. There seems to be a certain, to me, like computer programming, and this is how I've always looked at it. Like for the people who make video games and people who make software, I always look at it as kind of like you guys have a superpower, and it's a combination of like a superpower and like being like a rock star too. But I think there are some similarities. So for example, Jim, you speak multiple languages, real human languages. Do you play music by any chance, Jim?
No.
Okay, but some people are musicians too. So is there some parallels or benefits to people who speak more than one language or speak music that maybe helps you be a good programmer, or some things that maybe natural tendencies that live in these worlds?
I don't think
so.
I don't think so. You just got to give an effort.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think programmers, especially game programmers, are very creative, and creativity lends itself to all other aspects,
right?
That you might pursue, like music and languages and things like that.
Gotcha.
Well, for me, I'm performing arts. I've been an actor, a magician. I do technical work on beauty pageants to set design and like that. So I have a lot of different aspects. They're all very creative, and that's the thing is when you're programming this stuff, you got to be creative. Keep the creative juices going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I didn't learn a second language until after, long after the whole color computer main, activity had ceased. So can't really say that contributed there.
Yeah. And as far as when I went to college, the requirement for a second language, my programming was my second language. The college considered that, hey, it's a language.
Yeah, that's true. And it's a less forgiving language than a human language.
I don't think they offer that in most universities anymore, but back then, programming was so unique. They said as long as you took something different than English.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me it's just, something you pick up and you enjoy because it's just part of something of what you like to do. And I don't know. I don't think language has very much to do with it. I mean, you seem to be a wizard with all of these social media, and that obviously just kind of fascinates you and turns you on, and you just pour out the content in the different modes, and I couldn't even imagine any of that.
Yeah.
It's taken me 2 years to get a working webcam, so.
Just don't order one from that Voice On Technology, so you'll be okay.
there you go.
I think Jason Reighard's got a webcam with a switch on it, so you can turn it on and off. Oh, too much.
I was changing from black and white to color.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Brian, I still have your Atom cartridge. I'm going to have to... I will mail this to you, Brian Joyce in Australia. But it's here. It's sitting here on my little thing, staring me in the face to remind me, hey, dude, look up shipping on this and get a label. So I'll get that to you hopefully soon.
So do you think you're going to take up machine language or
assembly?
Or?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just the time. I mean, so I've had these plans, and I have these plans and I have this kind of logical order to how I would like things to happen, but these plans might get accelerated. But my plan was to finish my programming in BASIC series on YouTube, do a CoCo project in BASIC just to do it, and then from there, then start assembly and like transition from BASIC to assembly. Like everybody had says, well, you should do some assembly routines and speed up parts of your program and, test the waters and then go full assembly. So those have all been some of my plans, but my biggest challenge is being able to dedicate time to doing it.
Have you thought about giving up?
Thought about giving up? Never. Never going to give you up, Greg.
I knew he was going to go there.
Never going to let you down.
Never going to let you go. Because we are no strangers to love, my friend.
Sounds like a good Rickroll
the rules.
video, right?
You know the rules, and so do I.
There's a chick flick out there somewhere.
Not a CoCo project, but it could be.
I bet that's a great song to spoon to.
Oh no! Here we go.
Too much information.
Yes.
Oh my.
Well, it is CoCo After Dark.
Yes, it is. So we have.
Yeah, this is when the train goes off the tracks earlier than the daytime show.
I think that you should try a.
Go ahead, Rick.
Assembler. I think you should try a simple assembly project just to get your feet wet and see if you might like it.
Yeah.
You don't have to do something super elaborate.
Yeah, true.
This is a good segue for Steve.
Yeah.
For lesson number 1, blow up Stevie's head.
Nick Marotta says it's like a sad sausage fest in here. I don't know about sad, but
lesson 2: how to get past level 1.
Yeah.
Isn't machine language like?
We're gonna be stuck there for a while.
You have to do every little thing.
Well, there's machine language and there's assembly language. They're not the same thing.
Okay.
What's the difference?
What's the difference?
Okay, machine language is where you're hand coding everything down yourself. You're sitting there and putting in the actual hexadecimal codes down to do it. Where assembly language, you can work in an editor, it's more symbolic, and then a program goes through and translates all your references, all your information for you. So there is definitely a difference.
A friend of mine says that assembly language is like digging a post hole with a teaspoon. It takes a long time, but you have complete control over all the dirt.
Yep.
And machine language, you're digging the hole with your bare hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend that can actually do Z80 machine language. He's really big into the Z80.
I used to do Z80, and Popcorn and Audio Spectrum Analyzer were done as machine language programs.
Wow.
And then translated into 6809? Because those were on the CoCo, too.
Yeah. They were on the CoCo. They were done in 6809, but I did not have an assembler for 6809 at the time, so I hand-coded them in machine language.
Oh.
That sounds laborious.
Did you just transcribe it, or How did you do it?
I would write it down, and I would then next to it in the column put down the actual hexadecimal numbers. And I had to sit there and calculate, like when you have a branch to go from one location to another based on a situation, I had to calculate the branching offset.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was just, but that's the thing is machine language, you get to know it. And of course, I not only had experience with assembly language machine language, I also worked on a mini computer in microcode, which is basically on those guys, the machine language is written in another language called microcode, which is actual instructions of the actual computer. And then they have the microcode that gives you your higher level assembly language or machine language. So you could just imagine all the translations on a mainframe that you go through.
Wow. So is microcode literally the internal language of the processor?
Very much so. And it's the microcode that they play around with when they want to make instructions more efficient, like what they did with the 6309. Now, you can do it in microcode, or you can do it in direct logic. I don't know which way they went, but the 6809 had its own microcode in the chip. And so when you gave it an instruction, the microcode actually ran and would do the different functions of that instruction. Trust me, you don't want to learn first thing how to program in microcode before learning assembly. And I actually was taught that way. I was taught microcode before assembly by some idiots in college.
What are all the layers then? The basic starts first? Or last?
No, that's the last.
No, there's what you're trying to sit there and look at this like it's some sort of onion where you got multiple layers. That's not it. You have environments to write your programs in, and each of them has their drawbacks and their advantages, and you just got to pick it. Whether you're working in Perl on servers and like that, or PHP, or any other higher level language, then you're trying to get to your idea of your onion layers. There's another language called C, which has a lot of variants, and what C does is you write in that and it converts into assembly, and then the assembly is compiled, and that's what's executed.
Steve, did you build up lots of libraries in assembly to do basic things that you just use from program to program, like printing numbers and printing messages?
I definitely did have my environment that I've created. That's one of the reasons why I was able to do the game Rampage in roughly 30 days, is because I had all the tools pretty much worked out, and I just had to plug in what I was going to use. But let's see, there was a thought I was just going to bring up. Now, when I was going to the university down in San Diego, I was involved in the Pascal project. I don't know how many people remember that one. But what was interesting is Pascal was written in Pascal.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the chicken before the egg. What it was is the Pascal compiler could not use any functions that were newer than a particular date, because they always had to have a fallback compiler to compile the new compiler. It was very tricky.
In assembly, I couldn't see why you couldn't just build up a load of reusable macros or subroutines to do all the kinds of things you do regularly. But those would be different for each programmer, I guess, or?
Well, every programmer has their own style, their own way of doing things. And true, I'm going to try and teach Steve some of the ways I do things, but Rick's going to get involved. He's going to talk about the way he did stuff. If Nick shows up later, he'll talk about the way he did stuff. And I liken to this aspect of unique style of coding to being accents or dialect variations like Southern and like that. Not that one is necessarily better than the other. Of course, mine are always the best, but but that's just my personal opinion. It's my personal opinion.
Well, it's like a guitar. All right, so guitar's got 6 strings, right? And you can have 100 different people play that guitar, and everybody's going to play it their own way and have their own style on it too, right? So it's not necessarily a right or wrong play. There's going to be some people who are, virtuosos who can play classical and flamenco and folk and everything else. Some people can play really fast. Some people will just be casual strummers. But there's certain things, the language of music, the notes are the same for everybody, but how each person utilizes that instrument will vary, right? And so I guess that's what you're saying assembly is like too, huh?
Yep. Yeah, it's there's a lot of variation. And the thing is, I think the other element we were talking about layers and like that, is higher level languages do a lot more work for you. But as you get down to the lower level, such as assembly, there's less things going on where you have to write your libraries. You got to create your own operating system in most cases. But the kicker is that you really got to know hardware a little bit, because there is nothing available to help you with that hardware. I mean, BASIC has a lot of stuff in there. You want to put something on the screen, they've got all sorts of commands in there to put on the screen. Assembly language has absolutely nothing until you wrote it.
Right.
And that's the thing that scares a lot of people, is they don't know how graphics work or how sound works or how to read the joystick. And you've got to learn the hardware, the actual physical hardware. But one of the things I've been playing around with is eventually I will take all my old code and create a game OS, let that go out as Creative Commons, basically shareware or open source, and let people have it so they don't have to keep reinventing the wheel.
Right. That seems to be I guess it's good news, bad news. The good news is that as Rick was mentioning, you're digging a hole with a spoon. It's going to take you a long time, but you've got complete control over how you move that dirt, right? So on the downside, you have to, like you mentioned, you have to learn the hardware. You have to understand the hardware. On the upside, if you do learn it, well, number one, you're a little bit more empowered. You're better off for it. But now you can figure out, well, this is how the hardware is. This is what the hardware does. Let me see how I can make it work for me. Let me find some tricks. Let me find some hacks. Let me find some ways to get this faster, right? Better, faster, stronger. And we've seen that in the lifetime of the CoCo. We're seeing it now more than ever. But we also saw it a lot. What I always thought was interesting is like in the life of a game console, where a game console would live, 5 to 10 years sometimes. And in its lifespan, the same hardware would end up yielding better software over time because the programmers just figured out tricks and ways to do more that weren't obvious at first, either because they just weren't obvious or we didn't have the time. So it's kind of neat saying how the same bare metal, the longer you have the beat on it, the better things you can forge,
Exactly. But one thing about assembly is you're going to have to do math. Now, remember, before I said that, you got to do everything. Well, BASIC gives you floating point numbers. So you could have a number that's 3.5, and that works. And of course, sometimes that 3.5 comes out as 3.49999999, but still, you can have what we call real numbers. They can be negative, they can be positive, they can have a floating point decimal that allows them to be fairly accurate. In assembly, the only thing you've got is integer math built inside the CPU. And what I mean by that is they're always whole numbers. And the whole numbers have a range. And for example, in one of the registers that's only 8-bit, you can only hold 256 possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, how do you
Is there
do
even division available at all, or that's not built into?
Oh, you got to do division yourself.
So you got to use a multiplication to recreate division.
And there are some tricks you can get around it too, but yeah, there you have a built-in multiply, but it's only an integer, a whole number integer times another whole number integer, and both of those are 8-bit multiplying up to a 16-bit. I'm not going to be going into things that you've got with the 6309 because they have extensions where you can do, I think, two 16-bit multiplies for a 32-bit response. And that's something else, is the number of bits is what controls how much information that particular register is going to hold. And if you got 8, you got 256 possibilities, 0 through 255. If you've got a 16-bit number, you got 65,000 possibilities.
Yep, 64K right there.
All right, 64K. And that's part of the foundation, is you have to do all this type of work really in integer, because the moment you start to try and go into floating point, you're talking about it being much slower to process those numbers. So it's not just you got the numbers that are integer, you got to figure out which is going to be better, 8 or 16-bit for what you're doing. Now, if you're looking at some graphics on the screen, let's say that you're in a graphics mode that's only 128 dots across. Well, you can use an 8-bit number because you have no problem representing 0 through 127 for those 128 dots. But what if you're in one of the better modes of the CoCo 3, where you can have 320 dots across the screen? Well, you can't use an 8-bit number for that. You've got to use a 64-bit number, which all those calculations now generally take twice as long. It takes twice as long to load that number, to work with the number and save it back. So you can see that as you get better, greater precision, you start slowing down what you're doing.
Yeah.
And these are part of the balancing act that you have to do as an assembly language programmer. Find the most efficient way to do something. Do I do 8-bit? Do I do 16-bit? And there are ways to do 32-bit real easy. So that's the first mind-blowing thing for you.
Yeah.
You got to deal with numbers.
Well, ironically, Ron, are you talking because you're muted? Are you talking to your wife again? Are you talking to the voices in your head, your imaginary friends? You're still muted.
I'm convinced it's not for me. After hearing him. No way.
Yeah.
I test it out. Give it to me.
And actually, Rick, I'm sure there was a hole or two there. Is there any place that you want to fill in?
Well, we could talk about, there's a whole philosophy, different schools of thought on how you handle subroutine calls.
Well, I want to stay with numbers at first. Let's stay with the numbers, and we'll get to the subroutines and like that.
Tonight on Assembly Talk, we're talking numbers.
One of the reasons why when I teach classes, I usually always start with the numbers is because they're the key to everything. Let's say that you've got 5 possibilities for something. You would use the numbers 0 through 4 to represent them. So like if you had 5 different function calls, you would have to have a number to represent which function call you were doing. So numbers become the key to doing everything in the program. Now, one of the things that we can also do is we can set up labels where you can say no command equals 0. Move left command, that's 1. Move right command is 2. And then in your code, you would use the names instead of the numbers to make your code somewhat readable. But still, you're using numbers to represent everything. Every little thing.
Right.
And then you got to figure out all these routines to try to manage the numbers that you need. Why not just move to a higher level language like C, so that you can focus more on what is it you want to do and not have to manage these low level things like, how to manage numbers, how to get floating point operating, how to do the basic math functions like division and so forth.
Well, that's the thing.
You won't get the speed, but you'll.
That's exactly it. You're not going to get the speed. And the goal in assembly language for games is to get the speed, because that's the number one thing you're fighting against. Moving information around, trying to understand. We're going to get into artificial intelligence at some point, and you got to do artificial intelligence in integer, because if you try and do it in real time, it's incredibly slow for all the calculations.
I spent over 50 years just working on my real intelligence. Now we're we're stepping into the realm of artificial intelligence.
Well, the other advantage you have with assembly language also is you don't have as much overhead, and you have a lot more efficiency in your code compared to if you use a higher language. Yeah, less space.
See, if you want to do something in 1K, you got to do it in assembly.
Right. See, on a modern computer, I work in PHP. Perl, C, all the different higher level languages, because I got such a frickin' fast processor that I don't. Well, it doesn't. I mean, I'm sitting in front of a computer here with 32 gigs of RAM, and my other computer that's in the other room, it's got 12 CPUs. I'm not hurting for speed on those guys. Matter of fact, most of the time, it takes me longer to ask the GUI to do something than for it to actually do it.
Right. Looks like we're watching a high-speed chase here on Jason's video. Tonight on Cops. Bad boys. What's going on there, Jason?
So assembly is really only needed when you have an 8-bit old computer and you want to get the max out of it, I guess.
Pretty much so. I mean, back in the day, it was the way to go. They included BASIC because it was a simple language that people could write their simple programs in and get something done.
Well, assembler is still required if you're making low-level tools or compilers, transcoders, where speed matters.
Especially in the case of microcontrollers, where you don't have that much capability. You're not running with a floating point processor inside, a 12-core CPU. So, it's just, that's the trade-offs we do. Of course, it was just the power that we had back then.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, we thought we had a lot of power back then. We just didn't know what it would be a decade or two later.
The joke goes that, 4K, what do you do with 4K? Well, once upon a time, you landed on the moon. Nowadays, you open up another tab in Firefox.
Yeah, that's something else.
Yeah. But,
We got a decent number of people watching us live right now, too, so hello to everybody out there.
So as I was saying, numbers are important. Numbers are the key, and you got to be very efficient about them. And a lot of what you do is going to be 8-bit numbers and some 16-bit, and you might get into 32-bit as a little bit less. Now, one thing I wanted to do also with numbers before we move on to other things like Rick mentioned about subroutines, and we'll explain all that at that time, is you can't do fixed point integer math that actually emulates floating point, in the sense that you can have a half of something or a quarter of something. And a good example of that is the A and B registers. A contains an 8-bit value from 0 to 255. The B register contains a value from 0 to 255. But when you put them together, you got a 16-bit value that goes up to that 64K limit that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you imagine that the register A is a whole number, And the B represents a fractional. In other words, 1/256th. You now have got the ability to sit there and move something on the screen a half a dot or 3/4 of a dot. And you actually now have the ability to do fractions, which are essentially a decimal point.
Okay.
So don't give up hope that you can't do something besides integers. You can do real math and still have it fast. And it's this type of addition where you're setting up a fixed point for the number that you can do things like emulate gravity, like a bouncing ball, as it would vary. And it's, believe it or not, bouncing a ball normally takes calculus to do. But if you're doing it in real time, it's simple additions. So assembly
it's
language,
algebra instead of calculus.
Exactly. Gravity is just adding a speed every frame to that ball while it's in the gravity field. I'm not going to sit there and go into the full calculations where, based where you are in the gravity field, the gravity changes. I'm just going to sit there and say, no matter how high the ball is, it's got the same fall velocity that's being added to it. And of course, when you hit the floor, you just reverse the speed the ball's got. And then the ball goes up and the gravity gets added to it and actually causes it to slow down and then come back down again. So
how do you deal with negatives and if you've just got like integer registers?
That's the next point. If you use 1 bit of the 8-bit byte as a sign, as it telling it's negative or positive, you can represent anything from a negative 128 through to 0 and up to a positive 127. And the math processor actually does have instructions to help you understand that you are doing a signed variable. And that's the other kicker, is that you can make a signed variable so that you have your speed. And the numbers, when you add the stuff there, the processor handles letting you know if you had an overflow because you went over a negative 127 or a positive 120. I mean, a negative 128 or a positive 127. I know I'm getting a little too technical there, but there are some things the processor can help you with that math. So we now have fractional that we can use as decimal points, and we now have the ability to do sign. And we haven't had to write big, expensive programming machines to handle that. The processor can handle it directly and do it very quickly.
But you sacrifice a bit to get that sign value.
Exactly.
So your numbers shrink to 0 to 127 that you can handle at any particular point.
Which isn't very good for a graphic screen, because all graphic screens are, most of them are 128 starting, but they can, I think we're getting somebody's feedback.
Yep, I hear it too.
Now you can add an unsigned variable to a signed variable with the processor. Can you not?
If you watch what you're doing, but the thing is, you run the risk of an overflow on the signed value coming back out of it. A lot of times what I would do in an environment like that is I would take the signed variable and save the fact that it was signed or unsigned, and then make it a unsigned variable. And that factor would either tell me to use the add instruction or the subtract instruction. That way I could never have the answer confused and get something wrong.
All right. I don't want to be rude, but I need another drink. So I want to take a potty break and a refilling of my beverage break. But there's a few comments in here that we'll get to as well. Paul Fiscarelli had something to chime in here with too. Brian says my head just blew up. So I think you are blowing up head, Steve. So if that was your plan so far, you are on target.
As I said, I started off easy and then I went hard.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to go through the entire language of assembly tonight, but this is cool. I'm with you a little bit. All right.
Well, that's the thing is we just do it in little chunks. So, and we kind of work with that melon ball in your brain.
Right. Well, you know what would be good, because for me too, specifically, I'm very visual. And when you did your presentation at CoCo Fest, you had some nice pictures in your PowerPoint, So at some point in time, if you could show some visual things to go along with some of these things. Luckily for me, I understand binary to a degree, because I've been teaching, subnetting and 8-bit quadrants and things like that. So for me, I do understand a chunk of that, but I think for other people too, if they're trying to wrap their brain around it, if we could somehow make a pretty picture for that might be kind of cool too. All right, so we're gonna.
Stevie likes shiny things.
I do, Jason. Jason, where are you driving to? Are you in a high-speed chase right now? Are you in a hot pursuit?
No.
You're watching Cops.
That was just downtown Pittsburgh. That's all that was.
Okay.
I didn't even realize I had my camera on. I apologize.
That was good.
Well, that was great.
Yeah, it was. All right. So we're gonna run a commercial. I'm gonna give everybody about a minute and a half or so to refill your beverage, drain whatever you got to drain, smoke them if you got them, and we'll be back. And we can continue this as long as you guys are interested. As long as Steve feels like talking and you guys feel like listening, we can continue assembly talk after these words. Thank you, Steve. We'll be back.
Thanks, Steve.
Hi, it's Ron Delvaux, Timberman, and this is CoCoTALK.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
CoCoTALK is brought to you in part by Placeblex Dietary Supplement. Placeblex. We think it works, so will you.
Hey guys, Stevie Stroh, and for almost a year now, we've been hosting a weekly live talk show on YouTube called CoCoTALK about an extremely obscure retro computer system from 1980. But in this time, we've figured out how to fine-tune the live streaming talk show format, and we've also figured out that people love to get together and talk about things that they enjoy and that they have in common. So we are now taking this format to cover a much broader variety of topics that hopefully more people will be interested in and more people will tune in and join us for. So our first experiment was to turn CoCoTALK into an offshoot called CoCoTALK After Dark, and that's kind of the drinking game version of our show. It's got a very cool lounge vibe to it, a lot of laughs, a lot of fun. CoCoTALK After Dark has evolved into Retro Talk, where each week we can talk about different retro topics and different retro systems. And now we are also working on a new show called Geek Talk, where we will talk about just about anything in geek culture, from movies to video games, old and new, to comic books to collectibles, you name it. We want to make social media social again. We don't want to just post and comment. We want to talk and we want to listen, and we want you to talk with us about the things that interest you, about the things that you love, about the things that you tonight on Cops. Geek out on. So Jason gets a on DUI. A future talk show that will be both live here on Facebook and on YouTube. So follow OG Stevie Stroh on Facebook, follow CoCoTalk.live on Facebook, and hit me up on my website, ogsteviestroh.com. And as these new shows are being planned and developed and scheduled, we will try to let you know when they're out there, get the word out, because we want you to join us. And we want to talk about the stuff we love, and we want to have a good time. So we'll see you there, people. Peace out.
From Radio Shack, the TRS-80 Model 3. And at $200 off, it's a great value. Select from Radio Shack's huge program library to aid your children's education, plan your personal and household budgets, or to entertain with fast-action games. You can even learn to write programs. The TRS-80 Model 3, on sale for $7.99, only at Radio Shack and Radio Shack Computer Centers, the computer experts.
Gotta love those fast-action games. Yeah, no, that was...
Did you notice that in almost every commercial they do like that back then? It was never video games. It was always computer games.
Computer games. I didn't want to be confused with that.
No, considering the market had bottomed out.
Right. So earlier they were talking about Rick Adams used the analogy assembly language is like digging a big post hole with a spoon. Earlier, Tim Campbell was saying, I so appreciate this conversation and love the context of the discussion, but I am one drink too far in to keep up, smiley face. And then Dan Shepard, which a friend of mine used to work with, hey Dan, says, it sounds more like digging with a Coke spoon. And then Bruce Moore said, because you were talking about before, if you want to represent the number 5, you do 0 through 4. So Bruce Moore says CoCo Forever episodes are numbered correctly. They're 0 through 9, right? So, and then Paul Fiscarelli says, a fun thing to implement is a base 10 scoreboard converting from base 16 hexadecimal accumulators. So, and then Rick Adams, Rick, are you outside showing off your
I am
display?
outside, yes.
And live
Yes.
from outside of Rick Adams' home. This just in. So this is Rick's display on his Raspberry Pi.
These are my basement windows.
Yeah.
And if you come in real close, you can see the individual lights. Whoa! I just tripped over a bush there. Here's the individual lights.
Yeah, don't do that.
We don't have workers' comp
Yeah.
on this program.
Yeah. Okay, so my battery is at 10%. It's threatening to kill me.
How many accidents have you accumulated out there?
I've probably about I've seen about 3 with my surveillance cam. There's a place where there's a no U-turn sign, and there's a reason for it. In that if you stop for the opposing traffic to clear to make a U-turn, then it's just over a rise, and people come over that rise like you're in the movie Bullet. They come over that thing and just sort of they catch some air, and then there you are right there, and then there's an accident.
Wow.
85 degrees though. That sounds nice.
Oh yeah. 100% humidity.
I wanted to ask Steve about random numbers, and is it difficult to get on a
babies
colored computer?
Hey, you tell him, Rick.
It's difficult to do right. You need Steve's help to do that.
And back to you, Steve.
Yeah.
What is it about random that's difficult?
I'm going to drop off.
Okay.
All right, Rick. And by the way, Richard Lorbieski, who's Richard, you can speak, you can use your words, but he says, I'm still struggling to program my VCR.
It's kind of hard since you're talking all the time, but I'm not going to say anything about that.
It's that ego.
Hey, Greg, how do we respond to Richard?
Screw you.
Screw you, Richard Lorbieski.
Well, there's another one that used the F word, but I don't want to use it here.
Screw you and the horse you rode in on. So, yeah. So Ken says the secret to random numbers is finding a good algorithm to steal. All right, so tonight on Assembly Talk, we talk numbers, and now we're talking random numbers.
You would think the random numbers would be easy.
But that's the thing is, you turn on your computer, there's nothing in there that generates anything random. Now, you can come up with something called pseudo-random numbers, where it's a list of random numbers. You know, like the one I gave Rick was there's 65,000 numbers. They're in a random order, but every time I go into that list of numbers, they're in the same order. That's the thing about pseudo. Well, what I do in my video games is when I'm waiting for you to press your button to start the game, I'm constantly hitting that random routine to move it along. So, yes, it will be a random number, but the starting point in that list is random, and that's how I get my random numbers. So I use human interaction to do that. Now, the advantage or disadvantage is that when the game runs, it plays in the demo mode the same random numbers over and over again, because once again, the hardware is all synchronized together. It's doing the same thing every time you power it up. So the advantage that I use it is that I would put in a particular starting point in that random list, and I'd let the game play, and I go, oh, that looked pretty good for a demo. And I'd write down that number that I'd put in, and that would be the number I put in there every time, so I had a good-looking demo.
But it's figurable.
Mm-hmm. You know, it would happen every time, and that's how I did a lot of my demos. Is I didn't want to sit there and actually sit there with the joystick and program a routine of flying through like I did on Zaxxon. I just wanted a nice, good random, and I just let it do it. But random numbers, as I said, it's hard to come up with true random numbers. You talk to any computer scientist, and they'll tell you that the search for a true list of random numbers is almost impossible because you're working with a system that is so perfect.
The reason I brought it up is because I looking through my magazines earlier yesterday. There would be a couple of articles that would show up now and then and say how to figure randomness. You know, different articles on trying to achieve random.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask a question, Steve. You say so obviously the random pool you're coming from is a 16-bit number because you got your 65,000 combinations. So if the number you pull from those 65,000 choices that's what's known as the seed, or is the seed what's used to randomly generate those 65,000 numbers?
The seed is the starting point in that list of random numbers.
Okay.
And so it pops out with a number every time I call it. And the way I make sure that my list is more random is I use the fact that the person is interacting with the game to kind of move its placement in that list. And that helps a lot.
Gotcha. I'll just give you two examples that I understand of the word seed and see if I'm not sure I want to apply my understanding, but Dungeons of Daggerath, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. Every time we played the game, it was always the same dungeons. But what I heard is the dungeons were based on a random generator. However, they forced the same seed in every single time, so you got the same dungeon every single time. Because there have been some, decompiled versions of the game where you could actually have a randomly generated dungeon where the seed is random and the dungeons are random. So that's one time I've heard that word seed. Now another one is for, a more modern game that I am much more familiar with, but I'm sure some of us have heard of the game Minecraft. Mm-hmm. And Minecraft will generate a supposedly infinite world that is what they call procedurally generated. So it's kind of randomly generate the world and the different terrain types and stuff. And but you can hard code in a particular seed if you want a specific world. So there are websites that have Minecraft seeds. Hey, if you use this seed when you create a world, you will spawn next to a village, or you'll spawn next to, whatever. And so that seed term there has been used to where if you want to get the same world every time you start the game, use this seed number and you will get this predictable thing. So is that kind of what you're saying you're doing for your games? If you use the same seed, or you picked a seed and you got the same pattern in your demos?
That's right. And as I said, the pseudo-random number generator, it produces random numbers, but it's the same list of random numbers in the same order every single time. You just have, with 65,000, you have to find some way to get into it via the seed, where you start at a random point in this list of pseudo-random numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
That makes perfect sense, right, Ron?
Jeez.
Think of it like a deck of cards. You've gone through and you shuffled it, right? And it's all random. But you grab one card and you look at it, grab the next card and look at it, and as you go through the deck, yes, they are random, but they're in an order. Then you take that same deck without shuffling it, do the same thing again, you're going to get the same cards in the same order. That's what a pseudo-random number system is. It's random numbers, but it's a predictable order.
What if you play 52 pickup?
Well, you're the one that has to do the cleanup.
Yeah.
So on the CoCo, is there a way to do true random that's not pseudo random?
Well, even the random command that's in your basic, that's a pseudo random number generator. And if you remember, you give it a seed to change the starting point.
Okay, because I remember so RND was the basic command to pull a random number. But there was also an extended basic, there was a command called randomize.
Right.
And that's where you could pick a seed. And I always just use randomize timer. So based on what the computer clock was at the time that code ran, that would be the seed that I would run.
That's exactly what I was doing internally in my game, is that person starting the video game at a particular moment in time, that would change the seed.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. You just got to be careful with that technique, because it, depending on your setup, you could end up with the same seed every time the player starts the game.
Yes, but the thing is, I'm calling the random number routine thousands of times over the course of a second. And the person being able to catch it on the exact same thousandth of a second is nearly impossible.
Right. It's all about your implementation.
Mm-hmm.
So does this have any bearing in AI?
No.
Because AI, I mean, we live in a variable world, and computers are orderly. And does it make for a tough translation into our variable world with the computer?
One has nothing to do with the other.
So Ken, Jason's brother, is asking, was Pitfall done the same way with this pseudo-random stuff, or was that all pre-programmed?
Most of it was pre-programmed. In other words, the map of the world, that was given to me by Nintendo's development team. Mm-hmm. And I had to make the graphics of the map of the world. Now, a lot of the stuff that went on, if we can start with something very simple like Pitfall 2, which was based exactly on the Atari 2600 video game, there was very little memory available inside that system. There was a whopping 128 bytes. And to use 2 of those bytes to run the seed of a random number generator was very expensive. So a lot of those games didn't have that much random in them. Or it was simpler random that they did. Mm-hmm. It's just, it was tough on those. And Super Pitfall was a later development, and they tried to get away from it. I mean, there was different design decisions that they did when they did Super Pitfall. Like, for example, you had a gun, which David Crane was totally against, but didn't have any control. So he had a gun to shoot the bad guys. Which but the thing is, that's the way the games were moving in a direction as far as being more elaborate. But getting back to the random, as I said, pseudo-random number generators are a good way to generate a list of random numbers. The downside is if you start at the beginning, you've got the same number over and over again, but instead you try and use something that the human does to seed the random number generator, to start it at a different spot. That way the game always appears to be truly random.
Gotcha. Now, is that a limitation of old hardware? Does modern hardware have a better way to do random, or is that still a challenge because we're on a computer?
It's still a challenge, but some games will actually go to the internet to look up time. They'll do other things to try and generate the seed. I had seen a video game console use a diode junction, and the nature of it would actually kind of generate random voltage, and that would help with seeding the random number generator, but it's expensive to do that. The Z80 kind of had its own random number generator built into it. It was the refresh register, because one thing that the Z80 did is after it completed every instruction, it had an internal counter to help it refresh memory. Well, you could read that number, and based on things that were going on at the time, if the time had been extended from something the user had done, it would be truly a random number, and was used an awful lot to see these random number generators.
Cool stuff. Well, I think we should probably we need to probably get a little bit more formal with some of this. But I mean, I'm absorbing pieces of it right now, just listening to it. But
well, I agree with you that I need I need some sort of study plan where I've got some graphics coming up, helping me explain what I'm doing there. Today, I just wanted to get the feel. If this might work, if it would, then I could sit there and do a segment on CoCoTALK that lasts about 10 minutes that talked about a particular element of assembly language programming on the CoCo.
Yeah, oh, that'd be great. And I think
are you good with a chalkboard? Some people are graphical.
Yeah, like just like to whiteboard it out or whatever, like just hand draw.
I prefer whiteboards.
Yeah. Mikey just joined us. Mikey says we're randomly absorbing random numbers right now. So
it was definitely not a topic I was planning for tonight.
No, that's okay.
What's the best assembler to use on a CoCo for color? I mean, when it's just running color basic. I mean, not running OS 9.
That's what I'm looking into too right now. I haven't really had a lot of time to sit down and really look at them, because I've got a couple of things that I like to have in my assembler, and I got to see what they can do. I mean, I'm looking at the, I guess it's the Phoenix IDE. Is that the latest one?
That's the one that Bruce showed off recently, Roger Taylor's thing.
Yeah, and there's other stuff there that we can look at. So it's going to be a learning experience for all of us.
Yeah.
Even in the back of my mind, I've been thinking about writing an assembler that runs on the CoCo using some techniques I have to really speed it up and make it more efficient with memory, and not make it part of OS 9. I almost wish Curtis was here for me to say that. Watch him just get so upset.
So here's another pseudo intelligent question here, hopefully. So we talk about assembly being so assembly is a notch above the microcode of the. So there's the microcode, there's the machine language, and then there's assembly, right? Is that kind of the pecking order? So the microcode is really getting into the internals of the processor.
Well, in the case of most of the microcomputers that were out there back in the day, you couldn't get into the microcode. It was mainly the mainframe computers that had that option.
Right. Well, I think the modern Intel chips have the ability to flash and reprogram the microcode too, right? Because isn't that some of the stuff they're doing to fix some of these 20-year-old security holes in some of these Intel processors, is to patch the microcode inside the CPU?
Exactly. But the thing is, you and I, we literally don't have access to it because, one, we can't program it. Two, they're not going to let us know what the microcode is because it's a guarded secret.
That's trade secrets, right?
Yeah. But
all right. So let me. Sorry about that. And so what you're saying is, which is leading into where my brain was going. So basically, assembly language is a slightly more user-friendly version of machine language. Machine language, for all intents and purposes, is the native language of the machine. When you write an assembly and you compile that compiled assembly becomes the machine code that runs natively on the bare metal of the processor, correct?
Correct.
Now, and you also alluded to the fact that you're thinking of an efficient way to assemble or to compile, however you want to call this. So is it possible that different people's compilers, that some compilers may not be producing the most optimized machine code as possible, and that a better compiler might yield a faster running program, or a more optimized compiler might yield more better optimized code?
For assembly language programming, you are coding in assembly language. There's no way to optimize it better than what you do. But the thing is, there's different functions in there that help you write the code in the first place. Things like macros, stuff like that, pseudo functions, and etc. But it's when you get into things like compiled languages like C, Perl, Pascal, and like that. It's really based on what the compiler can do, because the languages are different. Just like BASIC is different from C.
Okay.
They're designed differently. They're different.
So where is there a margin to gain some efficiencies in a compiler, or would it only be compilers that deal in higher level languages that some might be more efficient than others, translating the high language down to a low language?
Compilers can vary differently on the high level languages, but when it comes to assembly, it's just how much they help you.
So there is no way to build a better compiler at this point. Compiling is compiling.
Well, let's keep our terms right.
Okay.
Assembly language program assembles your code. Compiler creates your code, because it's taking the high level language and converting it into the low level language of assembly or machine code. So yeah, there is a definite difference between an assembler and compiler.
All right, maybe I lost myself now. So the assembler is what you're writing your program in.
The assembler, you're writing an assembly language. You're writing an assembly language, but you run an assembler to convert it into the final code that runs on the processor, and that's the machine code. A compiler works on high-level languages.
Oh, okay.
And converts them into the low-level language of the system.
Got. So when you're writing an assembly, you don't necessarily have to compile. You're assembling it into machine code.
Right. Because it's more of a one-to-one translation. But what the assembler is doing is converting things from load A into the actual hexadecimal code of load A. You don't have to remember that. You don't have to calculate how far a branch is. It figures it out for you.
Gotcha. Mikey was asking a question about the Z80. He says, actually it started off as Rob Inman. Rob Inman says, is the random number generator one of the reasons for the popularity of the Z80 over Intel or Motorola?
I think the reason why Z80 became very popular, it's not a random number generator. It's a refresh register that made putting dynamic memory, which was cheaper memory, easier onto the computer. That's one of the reasons why Tandy used the Z80 over the 8080, because they would have to add support chips that would handle refreshing RAM. Dynamic RAM is extremely efficient as far as it doesn't take much silicon to store a particular bit of information. It only needs to use something called a diode, which is a single junction of silicon. A regular bit of memory, like a static memory, requires basically about 2 to 4 transistors, which could be up to 12 junctions. So you're going from one junction of silicon to 12 junctions to store that bit. You can see how that's much simpler, much cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
And but you have to refresh it, because this junction only remembers for a limited amount of time, and then it forgets.
So the bit that gets placed on there, the state of that bit, the 0 or the 1, is it kind of like stored in a capacitor?
Exactly. That diode is operating like a capacitor, and eventually the charge disappears. The idea of the refresh on the RAM is something that the chip does to help the chip remember. And as long as it gets to that location before it forgets, it refreshes it back to its full state of either 0 or 1. Now, I have to admit, when I was writing games for the Z80 and I detected the game was pirated, I would screw around with that refresh register to cause the memory to kind of start forgetting itself, and the game would just die. And you couldn't figure out why it died. It just died.
You had a self-destruct sequence.
You got it.
The agency will disavow any knowledge of your existence, and this game will self-destruct.
But another reason, the Z80 was also very cheap.
Yeah.
It was also extremely popular in Japan. And a lot of our devices that were starting to come out were coming from Japan. So they used it. A lot of the arcade games were based on the Z80.
Mm-hmm. An MSX system was too. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the original Sega Master System had a Z80 in it. And then when they brought the hardware over inside the Genesis, it also had a Master System in there. So it has Z80.
Right, right.
So it was a popular chip to be used. And I saw a lot of companies, oh, this is a great CPU. We're all familiar with it. And then they would link it to another video chip that wasn't designed to work with it, and then it became extremely inefficient. And the NEC did that with the PC 6000 system, where the effective speed wasn't running at full notch. It was running 25% because the memory for the video display wasn't working correctly with it.
Yeah, the basic games I've ported from that system are all really pokey.
Yep.
So I can get great improvements on the MC-10 out of the same basic code on those.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I found out about it when I was developing Megabug for it, and I did not have enough power on that CPU to actually do the magnifying mode. Yes, I see it. But no, I couldn't do the magnifying mode. And then I got flown out to Japan to talk to their engineers, well, really to talk to the head honchos about what the engineers had done in designing the system. And from what I understand, after I got back to California, a bunch of engineers were fired, which is very unusual for companies in Japan. They don't fire people. They stick you in a corner office, or they stick you in a corner and have you do nothing until you quit in disgrace.
Yeah, there's a lot of honor and tradition.
Yep.
So, yeah. Nick Marentes just came online. I wonder if he'll join us. So we need more foreigners on the show. Well, technically, we do have our backup foreigner, James Gerrie. He is in a foreign country, so we are definitely culturally balanced here on CoCoTALK, even after dark. The show knows no boundaries, so that's good. And who's been with us here? Speaking of the devil, Rob Inman says we need more Muppets. G'day, Nick Marentes.
Ease of use has arrived.
We've been talking about assembly language programming all night, Nick. You're just in time.
I'm gonna learn me some.
And Nick, you know how it is. We're both assembly language programmers, and we believe that programming in the 69 is an example of ease of use in assembly.
It is actually.
Yeah, it's just like Z80, in order to do an operation, you could only do it with certain registers. With the 6809, it was like, you want to do something? Use any register you want. You want to do something? Use any mode you want. It was never a restriction on how you wanted to do something. You just had to figure out what was the best way.
That would make it also easier to use as well.
Yep. It was definitely ease of use.
It sounds like a sandbox.
In all my years of programming, Motorola processors of the 6809 and 68000 were my favorite to code on.
So who have we got on this? I see there's a fellow Australian there.
Yeah, your neighbor. He said he yelled. He said he yelled out the window for you. You didn't hear him?
We'll see how long it took that sound to carry.
Took that long for the boomerang to hit your window there, Nick. We've been on for an hour and a half, so yeah. Sound does travel slower, so yeah.
I'm late. So have you finished your assembly game? Have you finished your assembly language game, Steve?
Who, me?
Yeah, Steve, you're the one who's supposed to have an assembly language game finished today.
Oh, was I? I didn't get that memo.
Neither did I.
Yeah, that just went out the window after tonight.
It's called Rockstar Pilot is what I'm coming out with, right? So,
No, I was trying to teach Steve how to do numbers in assembly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Start simple.
Yeah.
And then they got me talking about random numbers.
Apparently there are no random numbers. Did you know that, Nick?
Yeah, there's no such thing.
Wow. Yeah. Man, my mind is definitely blown at this point. This whole time I've been living a lie.
You should probably start doing little things like clearing the screen in assembly language. That was the very first assembly language program I was exposed to.
Doesn't everyone do that? How would you do the hello world in assembly? I mean, that is the quintessential first program, though.
Well, that's a good one to try because everyone's familiar with hello world from BASIC. So,
but see, the thing is, doing hello world in BASIC is designed to give you commands to put something on the screen. So yeah, you're looking at a line or two at the most. In the case of assembly language, you got to understand how the screen works, how the numbers work for the different characters, and like that. Because in BASIC, you put down "hello world" as a text string, and the computer figures out how to convert that text string into the code that the screen is expecting to see ASCII. Hello world. And yeah, because you go from ASCII into the character set that's built on the video display chip. So
hello world in assembly probably won't sell you onto assembly language. BASIC is so much easier to do a hello world.
Yeah. Sure.
See, I would sit there and say it would be better to have a simple dot going across the graphic screen. That would actually be easier to code than to do hello world.
Right, because that's just shifting bits or bytes.
The way I got to assembler, here it is, a bit of history here. Way back when I was still a kid at high school, I was the the local nerd that went to the Tandy stores, like a lot of us, and that would fiddle with the computer, and I became very proficient at BASIC, and I was writing the best BASIC programs that anyone could do in my area there. And there was this one other kid who also fiddled a bit, but he was nowhere near as good as me at writing BASIC programs. And one of the things that we're always talking about is how we can clear the screen of, how to do a screen whiteout on a TRS-80 Model 1. This is going back to the old Model 1 days. So we were trying to clear the screen to make it all white. Now I had written BASIC programs that brought it down to 2-3 seconds. I was able to white the screen out, which I thought I was pretty good. In walks this little shithead, and he comes in and he loads up ZBug, the machine language monitor program. Starts tapping all these numbers, which I had no idea what the hell he's doing. He types in this little program with its numbers, hits the enter key, instant whiteout. Like you didn't even see it happening. It was just instant. That was it. I was sold. I was beaten. You know, obviously he held the record for the guy who could do the fastest screen whiteout at the time. And that sold me. I said, well, I've got to learn myself assembly language, and that's what got me started. It's when you then compare something in assembly language compared to something in BASIC, and you clearly see the advantage that assembly language will give. A hello world probably wouldn't show it. The speed of printing hello world on the screen would look much the same. The speed at writing a program to do a hello world, BASIC leaves it for dead. You know, print hello world or 10 print hello world is a lot quicker than loading up an assembler and going into assembly mnemonics to write characters to memory space and all that sort of stuff. So it will not sell you on assembly language. You've got to do something that, like a screen clear, or as Steve said, move a dot on the screen, or something that it is slow in BASIC, so that you can appreciate what assembly language really does. And that's what got me going. Just seeing this little shit who beat me on the screen program. That was the trigger that got me going.
But you can see what the hump is, that people are so intimidated by assembly because, you know, if it takes so long to do these other kind of very basic functions, I mean, it's the simple fact is that, you know, these assembly language, machine language, arcade games that come out, they don't come out very quickly because they seem so painstaking to develop.
Well, it is. You really are getting it for the speed benefits, because no matter, yes, programming in BASIC is going to be a lot easier. And as you've seen on that music program I've been doing the latest version of that in BASIC, because it is so much easier to develop in BASIC. You know, it would have taken me a lot longer if I had done it all in assembly language, but you know, it was something I thought I could do in BASIC. On the other hand, if I was to write a Space Invaders game or whatever in BASIC, even though it would have been easier to write in BASIC, there is no way I could get the same results that I could in assembly language.
Right. So there's a trade-off here. It's like you either get speed into the development of the program, but the program runs slowly. Or you get a fast program, but it takes a much longer time to develop to get the program finished.
That's right. BASIC has speed of development. Assembly language has speed of execution. So
perfect.
Depending on what you're writing, you have to decide which of the two languages is better suited for the job. If you're writing a game, an arcade game especially, assembly language is the way to go. Yeah. But you know, in my case, I'm writing a music editor. Well, I just felt that a BASIC program could do it. Mind you, of course, it can't actually play the music. It's just the editor. For that, I do still have to go to assembly language. Again, that is when I need speed. So that's a hybrid I'm doing now.
So do you have USR functions in there? Or?
I just do an exec. I do an exec to the routine, and it comes back. I don't need to pass any parameters. I poke all the data in memory with the editor, and then I just exec to the machine code. It plays a song and just comes straight back. But yeah, some of my earlier programs, when I was first getting into assembly language, I used to write hybrid programs. In other words, I'd write a basic program. It was a basic graphic adventure, I think, called Stellar Odyssey I wrote. And I did it in BASIC. I thought BASIC was fast enough for most parts of the game, but there were certain parts which it was just too slow. So I wrote assembly language subroutines, a few of them, to handle those parts of the basic program which were just too slow. They were things like clearing the screen or drawing a map on the screen or doing sound. Those things in BASIC are just dead slow. So most of the programs in BASIC, and then I had several machine language programs, and I use an X equals user 1 or user 2 or user 3, you know, to jump to the appropriate assembly language routine, which of course happens straight away. It would just go, do it, and come straight back. So you get the benefits of speed in both areas. Speed of development, using most of it in BASIC, and then speed of execution thanks to the machine language subroutines. The rest of the program was okay in BASIC. But it depends on the game. Popstar Pilot, no way that could have been done in BASIC. There is just no way that had to be fully assembly language, as Steve would know, with most of his games being the same.
So, Steve, what you just got to figure out is what parts of your BASIC game need speed, and then just farm out that work to one of these, It
starts off with, it says a game by Steve Sturbridge, and quickly switches over to Zaxxon.
But this, seriously, I've done this with a few of my games for the MC-10. Is that I created a game in BASIC, and then put it up on the website, the Yahoo for the MC-10ers. And then one of the virtuosi of the machine language would take mercy on me and would create a USR function and embed it in my code and make it run a little bit, make it run actually decently.
Wow, that's cool.
And that's happened a few times, and it's been very fun.
Well, one thing that you got to remember about BASIC on both those machines, the CoCo and the MC-10, it's an interpretive language. That means it's actually taking what you've typed in, and every time it executes a line, it's trying to refigure what you're asking it to do and do that. When you compile, you're compiling it into the actual language of the computer, and it's not having to do this mini compile stage every time, which is what the interpreter is doing. So that's one of the things that slows you down. And there's no way you can have a user function speed that up. So that's one of the things.
No, but it can, you can have somebody, like I had a game where I had somebody who was basically created a USR function that read a variable function, a variable that I had created a screen chunk in, and then would just paint that on the screen for me very quickly,
right, and
fresh that and stuff for me. So that all of a sudden the game went from being very clunky to having a certain level of kind of finesse.
Well, the thing that Steve is looking for is he wants a nice, smooth game like what you see in the arcade.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're shooting for. And the thing is, when you have elements that are running in the interpreter, that's going to get it kind of choppy.
Right. So at that point, it's just self-defeating. Whereas where Nick Marentes' example was with a graphical adventure, the adventure interpreting part doesn't need to be fast, and you use assembly to clear a screen or load in the graphics, and then you go back to BASIC for interpreting your input. There's no perceivable loss of performance there, but in a game, every millisecond counts. So the fact that BASIC's in an arcade game, the fact that BASIC's in the picture, it's already a hindrance, is what you're saying. It shouldn't be done in BASIC, period. Which I get.
You need to choose the language which best suits the program.
Yeah,
really.
And listen, I don't disagree with any of that. I absolutely don't disagree with any of that. And doing it in assembly learning assembly is a bucket list item. Doing it in assembly is a goal, hopefully a 2018 goal. But I also think for my own benefit, because I haven't written any program in a million years, and the BASIC is a language I, for the most part, kind of understand, although I'm still trying to relearn it again and remember it. I think I would like to just do one project that I start and finish in BASIC, and even if it sucks and even if it's slow, it was mine and I did it and I finished it. God bless you, Mark Overholser. My biggest problem is never finishing anything, and so I think I would like to, and maybe I picked the wrong project for a game, because I've done games in BASIC, and I'm just, because I haven't done it in years, I'm trying a different approach to how I'm doing it and all kinds of stuff. But I mean, I've done arcade-ish games in BASIC. I've done games in P mode 4 screens and stuff that were chunky but playable. Maybe this one is a little too ambitious for my first one. That's still to be determined. But I know the end game is this project of Cosmic Aliens. I think, again, I'm not trying to be too over ambitious, but I want to do it in stages. My plan was stage 1, do it in BASIC, even if it sucks. Right? Stage 2 is maybe find a compiler, and then just take the same code for the most part and just compile it, and it should run a little bit faster if nothing else. And there you go. Here's your compiled version, a little bit better. Stage 3 then is kind of what Nick was saying. Initially, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe I'll just do some routines to speed things up. But now hearing what Steve Bjork is saying is that because of the interpretive layer, that even doing routines, that's for an arcade game, that just doesn't seem the way to go. So maybe we don't try the transition from BASIC to assembly, then it's just assembly. Right. And then maybe that will start my next series, because when I finished my series in BASIC, after I did my how-to program in BASIC and finished that book, the next series I was going to do was going to be how to program in assembly. The only difference is I'm literally having to learn it. At least with the programming in BASIC, I kind of have a grasp of that language. So I was actually trying to create value added. And not only this is what the book says to do, but here's some examples. Here's what my brain says. Here's some out of the box. Here's some off book, off script examples. And so in my BASIC series, I did a lot of demos that I just pulled out of my head. And that's how I learned as a kid was, okay, here's what the book says. Here's a new routine. Here's a new thing you can do. Let me now run with that and see what I can do with it. And I always need a proof of concept. Okay, I think I get it. I think I understand what it can do. But now let me try this and see if I can do it. Let me see if I can make it do what I think I can do with it. And that's what I've been trying to do in my BASIC series. Now, I'm not sure to what extent I'm going to be able to do that in assembly, because I'm literally, finding my way out of the paper bag.
But it all depends on what you want to do, Steve. I mean, if you're happy just trying to, complete that program that you were trying to make when you were living back in 1982 or whatever it was, then BASIC's fine. I mean, that's what I do. I mean, I'm not trying to make the best games. I know my BASIC games are crap, right? But
well, yours are.
Part of the retro hobby is just kind of doing the things that you would have liked to have been able to do, but didn't have the time or the skill and knowledge at the time, but you kind of dreamed about being able to do, and then completing that now.
Yeah.
And so if that's all you want to do, then it's like, could I have made that game I kind of thought about when I was back then? That's all I'm doing. And it just depends on what you want to do.
Right.
I mean, retro hobbying doesn't have to be about making, the greatest thing. It can be about, kind of fulfilling the childhood activities that you were unable to kind of do at the time.
Sure.
Well, the main reason why I've been suggesting a go to assembly language is that was his final goal. That's where he was going.
Yeah.
And rather than doing all these intermediate steps,
quit beating around the bush.
You just dive in and learn assembly and do it.
Yeah. And that might be the way to go. So,
couldn't help noticing Mark's got 2 6502 clunkers behind him.
Yeah.
Hey, Nick. I don't know if you realize this, but we have James.
How'd Dad get up there?
We have Jim Gerrie on camera. Have you ever seen Jim Gerrie before, Nick?
Yeah, he's the one that was talking just now. Yeah.
Yeah. But we've had him on a few times, but I don't think we've had him on camera, right?
No, look away! Look away!
I think many people thought Jim Gerrie was some type of artificial intelligence supercomputer, but apparently he's a human being.
Yeah, the rumors that I was a bot are highly exaggerated. Yeah.
This is what an MC-10 user looks like.
This is your opinion on MC-10. Any questions?
Can we get a profile view?
Yeah. It's not good for your health, that's for sure.
Well, I gotta say, we have a couple of prolific people here. Steve Bjork being one of them, obviously, and Nick Marentes. But when it comes to what you've been doing, Jim Gerrie with the MC-10, you are prolific is an understatement for you. I mean, the volume of things you have cranked out is commendable. So
yeah, well, I mean, for me, it's just an opportunity to kind of troll around and find out about basic code and stuff. I mean, I really liked discovering about the NEC PC there from Japan, and exploring their basic program magazines and some of the code that's up online on that. It's just a way of kind of learning about old computers from different places and stuff, and then bringing it back. I'm really surprised that Steve Bjork programmed something for that machine, though. It's really, really slow.
As I said, some engineers were fired over it.
I guess, I mean, the Z80 really didn't cooperate well with the MC-6847 there.
Well, okay.
We're not really meant to cohabitate.
No, what it is totally different designs on bus. One was synchronous, one was asynchronous. In other words, the 6847 needed to get at precise times information from memory, but it had a half cycle that it didn't need it, and that's when the 6809 in the CoCo would get its information from memory. So they're able to share the memory without interfering with each other, and they stay synchronized. In the case of the Z80, an instruction was multiple T states, and it could be like 2 or 3 T states, or it could be 14 T states. And what would happen was the instruction would get interrupted by the 6847 asking for memory. And you could have an instruction get interrupted 2 or 3 times while the 6847 is trying to get to its memory. So you keep slowing down the chip with all these accesses when, and the Z8 just has to stop what it's doing and wait for the 6847 to get its memory, and then it could run. Now, there was a mode in there where you could turn off the video display and run the the Z80 at full speed. But what good is that when you're playing a game?
Yeah.
So it's just not kosher to have those two kinds of architectures cohabitating.
It was like oil and water, it sounds like, huh?
Oh, yeah. It was just, the thing is, they didn't want to use a 6809 or a 6802 chip because they weren't that familiar with it. They were familiar with the Z80.
Okay, so they said, here, we got this graphics chip, and we want to take this processor that we know, and we're gonna make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but they ended up with like peanut butter and
salami.
Yeah.
Any idea why they chose the Motorola 6847 as opposed to something else that might have made more sense?
Who knows? The chip was cheap. It was lots of color. It worked on every TV in Japan because it had so much overscan. In other words, on a standard 6847, there's a lot of border. So it worked on every TV.
Here's a why did Tandy do this?
Hold on.
Tell me why did Tandy do that?
Go ahead, Nick.
All right. Why did Tandy limit the MC-10 to only 4K? Less by the time it, basic was installed, of course. Why didn't they just include 16K as standard? That would have given it high res, wouldn't it? Or the ability to do the high res graphics that the 6847 does. That alone would have, maybe made the MC-10 more popular.
What chip was missing in the MC-10 that was in the CoCo?
The SAM.
The
SAM. What does SAM do? It refreshes dynamic RAM. So without that, you had to use static RAM, which is much more expensive.
What was the great RAM drought? I seem to recall that concept. Somebody said, like in the early 80s, there was a time when RAM prices just went through the ceiling, and there was some kind of like...
Oh, because there was a factory in Korea that burned down, and so the
supply
was limited.
It would happen every year. The price would go up because people speculated on it as a commodity, and they would buy up the chips and they'd sell them. And I knew to buy my chips shortly after April 15th because those guys had to go sell a lot of chips to pay for their taxes. And it happened every year. And my buddy said, "Why do you wait until April?" I'm going, "Because that's when the prices are going to be the lowest." Wow. And sure enough, it was.
The one place he was talking, or the one area, the point in time, and Steve was right. It's a seasonal thing when RAM prices would fluctuate. But there was an earthquake in Japan that destroyed a factory that makes a resin that is only used in or only manufactured in 2 parts on the planet, and it was a key ingredient for semiconductors.
What year was that?
91. It was
happened in 87 too.
Yeah, but it was in Kobe, Japan, I think, or something like that.
Oh, yeah, that affected the modern day, but
yeah,
going back, this fluctuation happened all the time.
Oh, yeah,
prices could be $200 for 16K, and then a month later could be $600-700.
Right, yeah, because then you had speculators who would go in there and buy, dry up the whole supply chain, and then, of course, you had to go out on the spot market because most manufacturers, when they buy stuff, they buy it on contract. They say, look, you're going to provide me with so much stuff, and this is what we're going to pay. That's the agreed price, and no matter what, they had to, the cost of raw materials.
Yeah. Now, back about 81, 82, I was at Datasoft, and our company got raided because one of our divisions sold chips. And the government was looking into whether or not there was some sort of price fixing. And I remember I had to step away from my desk while these FBI agents searched my desk. And they opened up the door, and I had all these EPROMs. And the guy's eyes lit up and said, "I think we got something here. I think we got something on him." And one of the other guys came over, looked at it, and says, "No, that's not the chips we're looking for. We're looking for dynamic RAMs. Those are EPROMs. You can tell by the window."
Mm-hmm. These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Because he was all set to arrest me.
Wow.
Because I had those chips in the drawer. But there was a price fixing scandal happening at that time.
Yeah, but the one I was talking about, that was the one that it went on for months. It was almost like the hard drive crisis wasn't too long ago when you had all those floods in Thailand, and so you had a shortage of hard drives, and it just prices went through the roof.
Well, this day and age, memory prices continue to go up because they're sticking more and more RAM in cell phones.
Yeah,
and that's putting pressure on PC RAM prices.
Mm-hmm.
They're, I think, 25-30% higher than they were a year ago. And usually the stuff goes down. And don't get me talking about graphic cards.
Oh, yeah, Bitcoin.
Hey, getting back to some MC-10 stuff, earlier on, Ken Reighard mentioned that there is no else command in the MC-10. Like we have if, then, else. So like if this equals this, then do that, else do that, meaning not equal to. Mm-hmm. So it's a nice way to kind of chunk all that into one statement. But apparently else does not exist in Microcolor Basic, huh?
No, that's true. I mean, it's missing it pretty much maps to Color Basic.
Color Basic.
Unextended Color Basic, but and I don't think that has an else command either, so.
Yeah,
it just has a few added commands like var pointer and some of the math functions added to it that make it a little bit more functional than the very most basic Color Basic. But it didn't get else, and it doesn't have an edit command, and
Now, what about the MCX 128 with the?
It adds all of those. It adds pretty much everything except get and put for the
high-res graphics. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I know James Diffendaffer has been optimizing ROM. Now, apparently this MCX 128, well, it's adding basic commands. So would that technically be a ROM extension, or did it copy ROM into RAM and just rewrite ROM?
I I think it just replaces the ROM that is being used by the MC-10.
So we bypass the onboard ROM and we boot to the ROM in the MCX 128.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay. And so it's got the original code plus some new instructions in there. So I'm just wondering if James Differendaffer's optimizations for the MC-10 basic ROM could be retooled into maybe a firmware update to the MCX 128.
Yeah, I suspect that people would like to have that happen. It's just that the community is so small that there's it's pretty hard for people to kind of get the oomph to put those kind of products out for a limited number. So.
And then
all the stuff is out there for the person who's willing to do all that hardware stuff themselves.
Yeah. When you guys were talking about when Nick was saying why didn't they add 16K to the MC-10 and why didn't it get to high resolution graphics modes, and Steve was saying use static RAM. So Ken was saying why would they make a cheaper computer with more expensive RAM? And was the SAM that much more expensive? Was that a cost justification to not use a SAM but use more expensive RAM?
My understanding is that the MC-10 was made because they thought RAM prices were going to remain pretty high in the early 80s, and that people were going to be using more limited machines longer. And so they thought, in other words, that Sinclair ZX80 or the Timex phenomenon.
Sinclair 1000, yeah.
Yeah, I guess the people at Tandy just thought there would be a market like that for ultra low and inexpensive computing for a lot longer than there was in North America. The prices came down for all of the components and for RAM especially, so that you could get a color computer to a price range that people would buy, and so that route of ultra low cost computing just kind of didn't pan out. But
yeah, well, the bad thing about also the MC-10, it didn't even have a motor cassette relay or joystick ports. I mean, I just don't understand, especially if they were trying to make it into a gaming machine without joystick ports.
Well, you got to also remember, at that time video games were a no-no. They wanted to call it a computer. Mm-hmm. And having joysticks is a low priority for a computer, high priority for a video game system.
Right.
Yeah. Well, if that was the case, they would have put a better keyboard in, but hey.
Yeah, again, cost savings.
Well, also that keyboard was designed to have an overlay. So you would buy a program and there'd be something that plays over the keyboard like they did with the original CoCo.
Yeah, the original chiclet keyboard, yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a French version of the MC-10 called the Alice, which looks almost the same, but it's in a red plastic case. Now, John Linville has an Alice, and then John Linville got an expansion card for that Alice that actually adds joystick ports.
Yeah, its 16K RAM pack thing had two joystick ports on it.
But the irony, I think you said the irony was that the joystick adapter went in the same slot as the memory expansion, so you could either have joysticks or more RAM, but not both, or maybe it was a combo card. Now I know also Ed Snyder. Ed Snyder reproduced the MCX 128, which was a Darren Atkins design. But I think Ed Snyder also came up with an MCX 128 on steroids, where he added the sound chip and the two DE9 joystick connections to that too, all on one board for the MC-10.
Nice.
Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah, I've seen the mock-ups for that. But, I mean, the hard part is that, if you're going to develop a game, very few people are going to have these special things.
Oh, right? Yeah, no doubt. You've done a few things, though, Jim, for the MCX 128, haven't you, just to take advantage of extra RAM?
Yeah, just for shits and giggles, really. But just to try to fill out the software available for that wonderful hardware expansion. There's not very much out there, but put about half a dozen or more, maybe.
Right. So
programs. But they're just variations mostly on CoCo games that don't use get or put, or can have something else put in its place or whatever.
Okay, gotcha. Ken's asking, can we shoot the Alice to the moon? To the moon, Alice. That's a good.
The Alice is a great thing, though. It's like the MC-10 is such a orphan little machine. But then if you're an MC-10er, once you discovered that it went to France and it got joysticks and it got upgraded and it had improved graphics cards added to it and a whole alternate life. It's like discovering that it had that your twin led an alternate life as a spy, something like that.
Yeah, don't forget, we also imported Jerry Lewis to France as well.
Yeah,
that was an export. That was an export, not an import. But yeah,
entirely alternate career there. That was much better than at home.
Do you know the story of that Alice machine? Is that an official clone or license transfer, or did they just
Tandy basically, I think, cut its losses in trying to market it in North America. But the French and the British were at like a different time scale, right? Like, because the societies weren't quite as affluent as North America, their home computing was like a few years behind us, I think. So I think Tandy could see, there's a big market opening up for low-cost computing in France, and we can maybe offload this and save a little bit of our investment on that. And so they sold it to Matra and Hachette, and they went to town with it.
So that was an official thing, not like a clone or anything else. It was literally a transition of.
Tandy sold the design to them or licensed it to them, and they.
How common or uncommon are the red Alice MC-10 systems out there? Are they hard to find, or is it dependent? Like maybe they're rare in the United States, but more common in Europe or Canada, or
they're like one of the more. They were not a super popular system in France, but they were fairly common. So you can pick them up, and they have beautiful cases that they come in and stuff like that, in boxes and box art. And they have some really neat games and stuff.
They come with a bottle of wine since it's a French machine.
The French. I mean, the red color is really.
Yeah, this is a red color. This goes good with the beef tartare and. When you open up
really useful for me to kind of be able to get some software, because they did develop some games for it that, basically ran on the basic MC-10 kind of equipment, and I've been able to kind of like pull some of that back into the Anglosphere and such, and that's kind of fun.
That's cool.
There's actually a few pretty well done games for the MC-10, like a Pac-Man and a few other things. But they require the 16K of RAM, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't. And the thing is, you can't go above that resolution graphics 3 barrier or whatever it is. That you can only get up there like 128K, 128 pixels of scrolls.
Because when they designed it, they did not design the expansion to talk to the video chip.
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know why Tandy did that. I mean, it was some cost saving.
Hold on, I have a jingle for that. Hold on.
Tell me why did Tandy do that?
I mean, for MC-10ers, that's the big bugaboo is. If they just attached a few more wires internally, we would have been able to have 256 by 192. But instead, we have a max at only 128 by 192.
Yeah.
Well, even that would have been all right had they had 16K of RAM, of course.
Yeah, but once you get the 16K RAM pack, it goes up to 20K. So the kind of the standard. Right. The standard for most MC-10ers is 20K.
Right.
Is that an official term, an MC-10er? And by the way, all this MC-10 talk now is making Steve Bjork's head explode. So it's your turn now, Steve.
Oh, it's time to make my head explode. Just making me want to get my
being very tolerant.
No. I want to get my gun collection out. They're great for target practice.
So what is the term for an MC-10 enthusiast? Like, we are coconuts. You're using the word MC-10er. Is that an official coined phrase, or?
Well, I suppose so, but I've always liked to think of the MC-10 as like the little brother of the CoCo, really.
Yes.
The annoying.
I think it's more like the red-headed stepchild.
Yeah, right.
There you go.
It's a ginger.
The special needs stepchild.
Special needs, my retarded brother. Oh man.
Well, see,
so I mean, I don't see if I think of the MC-10 as basically microcolor. It's just like a 4K or a 16K CoCo without, extended
features.
basic.
Features, yeah.
But you don't actually use an MC-10 though, do you? You use the emulator.
I do all my stuff on the emulator. But when I was in high school in 1983, I wrote in BASIC a word processor. I wrote in BASIC a spreadsheet program, very basic versions of those, and I used those. I wrote papers for high school on an MC-10 back then. Mm-hmm. So,
Jim, what do you do for a living?
I teach university.
And what do you teach?
Philosophy and religious studies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I started writing in high school papers on the MC-10 though.
So
if you spent that long with the MC-10, I can understand why you have it's definitely thinking about religion quite a bit.
It is my I had to wire it up to a friend's old you had some kind of like a fancy typewriter that had an RS-232 input. Mm-hmm. And getting that thing to talk, everyone doing basic soldering back then to try to get these things to work so they could type out something, that was all very exciting back then. But, so it's this is all a nostalgia return to that time of exploration and computer development at the very raw edge of things. But yeah, I had a good time with it back then, so I'm still having fun now. I did stuff with CoCo. I've actually got a CoCo, and I bought my sister a CoCo, and she went off to university, and so I had the CoCo from her for many years before I had my MC-10 back. And I did some programming in Basic 09 and Motorola's C compiler for the CoCo under OS 9. I'm not, if I'm a CoCo, I'm an OS 9 person for CoCo.
Well, MC-10, OS 9, same thing.
Yeah, both orphans, I guess. But when it came finally to kind of just doing a hobby, in my post-50s, I've kind of settled into just kind of doing type-in programs and kind of reliving the type-in era of the early 80s.
What year did the MC-10 come out again?
I think it was like 83.
Yeah, it was 83.
Had it as per usual, Tandy's always at least a year behind. Had it come out a year earlier, it would have been more in competition with the Sinclair ZX81, and it would have looked like a good computer back then. But
it was probably about a year late.
Yeah, a year late at least. By the time it came out, Sinclair had moved on to the Spectrum, which was much better anyway. So there's no way the MC-10 could have competed.
Well, see, this is my point. Everybody came out with the cheapest computer they could come up with, and then they came out with more advanced machines. They had more memory, all that stuff. Then all of a sudden, Tandy does an about face and comes out with this machine.
But they weren't alone in that. Commodore had this fit too when they made the what was it, the Commodore 16 or whatever it is. After they made the this kind of idea of like cutting back was not just handy.
It failed as well.
Mm-hmm.
Which what?
Well, that's the thing.
The Commodore 16, it also failed.
But Apple, Atari, these guys kept producing better and better machines.
They moved forward and not backwards.
Not really, because the IBM came out with the PC Junior.
PC Junior, which was a flop, but at least we got the graphics and
sound. Well, I didn't say IBM. I said Apple and Atari. Now, it's just, in the world that I was, the thing is, you always came out with something better to improve what was problems. And, of course, when I was developing my games, there was a lot of issues with the CoCo. And then Tandy gives me an MC-10 to play with. And I'm going, what the hell's going on here? You guys are going backwards.
It only pays to go backwards if your new machine is significantly cheaper. But I don't think it was significantly cheaper. People could see that, okay, I'll spend another 100 and get a more powerful computer. The prices...
Well, actually,
it was significantly cheaper when the CoCo at 4K was $400.
Mm-hmm.
If it had come out then.
It had a higher profit margin on it too. And Tandy's take on it was also to corner more market share of the computer market. So that's why they thought catering to a lesser, or supposedly an untapped market place. Because 83 was also a very busy year for Tandy. They introduced a whole slew of machines, including like the Model 100. They did the Model 16, or actually the 6000. This is when they also were transforming from Radio Shack to Tandy with their computer products.
Yeah. Anyway, I got trapped on that's my nostalgia computer now, but
yeah. Well, it's always been a personal favorite of Steve Bjork, so we hear nothing but praise from it. So
we're used to persecution in the MC-10 world.
I've always used. Seriously, I've always used the phrase when I was developing for Tandy. I was a big fish in a relatively small pond that nobody knew about, and I was doing pretty good. The problem is when you do the MC-10, you can be a big fish, but you're in a mud hole.
It's not even a pond, right? So it's a puddle. So we're now at 2 hours and 20 minutes. We've only taken one commercial / potty break. I think I could use another. So I'm gonna take a bio break and replenish my beverage again. So we'll give us all about a minute and a half, 2 minutes on this break here, and we'll be back if that's okay with you guys.
Okay.
Sounds good.
CoCoTALK After Dark.
Hi, I'm Kieran Astor, author of X-Raw, and your brain is resolving sensory input into CoCoTALK.
We'll return after these messages.
Hi, I'm Bruce Moore, and this is Jacob Moore, gotcha. And we are the Forest of Doom guys, and the CoCo Forever guys, and we're at CoCo Fest, and we love Stevie Stroh.
What if, knowing what I know now, I could go back in time, join Tandy Corporation, and change the course of history? CoCo Forever.
How does it feel? I'm still believing.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me. It's Original Gamer Stevie Stroh. Gameplay. To get your copy of a Gameplay Goodness Color Computer Gaming DVD today, head on over to 8bit256.com. There you will find several DVDs featuring color computer gameplay videos by the Original Gamer Stevie Stroh. So to get your very own copy of a Gameplay Goodness Color Computer Gaming DVD, head on over to the Retro Swag Shop at 8bit256.com and tell them the Original Gamer Stevie Stroh sent you.
Let the Radio Shack TRS-80 put the world of color computing into your home. Instant loading program packs turn any color TV into an exciting game arcade. And there's more. The color computer is an educational aid, a home management tool, an up-to-the-minute electronic information service. The programmable, expandable TRS-80 color computer from $399 only at Radio Shack, the biggest name in little computers.
We now return you to CoCoTALK.
Sorry, I missed that one.
Hey everybody, this is Bill Noble, co-author of Nitrous 9. You are listening to CoCoTALK Live, the leading live CoCoTALK show.
Alright, and we'll leave it at that. Okay, so we're back. We're here. Can you guys hear me? Some of you might be muted. I don't know. Anybody there? Oh, you know what? Hey, I have Skype muted. I can't hear you guys. Hold on. Sorry. Okay, we're back. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Huh? What?
And I can now hear you. Ben Jimenez just chimed in and said, "How about doing game jams for the CoCo?" I don't know what you know. Not sure what he means by game jams. You talking about a programming competition, or you talking about a game playing competition? A game jam.
Sounds like some type
I just
of
did a game jam.
Fruit-based.
What is a game jam, Jim Gerrie?
I think there's a site called Game Jolt, and they just run these kind of competitions for programming, and they're like 14 days.
Okay,
14 days to come up with a. So if you had a 14-day deadline, could you finish your basic program? Do you think, or?
Could I? Who the hell knows, right? But yeah. Sometimes people work best under pressure, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. A game jam for the CoCo. Okay, I get it. Well, that's kind of like a couple years ago. They had the 4K challenge, right? Where write a program that runs in 4K, and how long is Retro Challenge? Is that a month long?
It's a month, yeah.
Okay, so Retro Challenge is a general thing, where it just basically says come up with a retro project, and whatever it is, complete that project in 30 days. So a game
every year
jam,
there's a 10-liner basic program competition out in Germany there, or Denmark, I think.
Okay.
Could you boil your basic game down to 10 lines?
Oh, never. I could do a 10-line intro screen. So 10-line title page. So no, that is. I mean, I know on a retro system, you learn efficiencies. You learn to do the most you can with the least amount of space to conserve memory and code and everything else. But yeah, to me, 10 lines is just ludicrous. It's just. Ugh. I know Jim Gerrie can do it, but Steve Strobridge ain't doing squat in 10 lines.
Now, if you're using the editor, the line can't be over 255 characters. But if you do some tricks, a line could be 2-3K in size alone.
Yeah, 255 is pretty long. You can get a lot of stuff in that, and if you got 10 of them, you'd be amazed.
2,500 characters of 2.5K in 10 lines, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I used to bury assembly language in basic lines of code. The mouse driver programs I did that talked to the high-res Joyce routine that went into the Rainbow Magazine. They used that. It was one line, had all the code in there.
Hey, Ben Jimenez? I don't recognize the name. Do we know Ben from somewhere? Ben, how did you stumble across? Use your words, Steve. How did you stumble across this show, Ben? And you know, are you a CoCo guy? Are you a retro guy? I'm not sure how you came into us on Facebook, but we're very happy to have you here. So it says they do it all the time on itch.io. Is that a site you're familiar with, Jim Gerrie?
No.
Itch.io or itch.io or?
Doesn't ring a bell. The site I used was Game Jolt.
Game Jolt. Okay. So I like that idea. I like that. That is kind of interesting. Where you're a member of the group. Okay, you're of the CoCo group on Facebook. Okay.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
All right. So cool. And yeah, Jim Gerrie had chimed in for a little bit too. Jim Gerrie said that the Commodore 16 was basically a train wreck, but the Commodore 116 was the Spectrum killer. So. I mean, our conversations have gone all over the place tonight. It's kind of cool. I think you follow the Tandy group. Okay, cool, Ben. Glad to have you here. I think I've been kind of steered and coerced into maybe fast tracking my assembly timeline. And you used to get the newsletter. Which newsletter is that? Did you get the Watchtower? Or okay, Richard says he's going to be right back. All right, Richard, be careful. Who has been very quiet tonight? Ron, you've been a little bit quiet. Brian Joyce, you've been a little quiet.
Actually, I'm listening.
I made lots of noise with my computer. Well, silent noise.
Yeah.
Lights and things.
It's not required to speak to be here, but Jason, you've been kind of quiet back there.
Hopefully he's making my cable.
Very quiet.
Are you making my cable at the moment?
It's on the list.
Excellent. Can't wait.
Ron, you've seemed to use the MC-10 quite a bit.
Yes.
Were you a user when you were? Did you have one when you were younger? Or?
Well, it's the first computer I ever had. My brother-in-law had a, the white VIC-20, and I went home, and I thought, I'd like to get my own computer, so I got the MC-10. I did the same thing he was doing. He was using the cassette. I had a cassette. I programmed my own. I have tapes and tapes of stuff that I copied from either magazines or tried making up my own stuff, which was, I'd make menus and have it do a couple things. I had the printer, the thermal printer.
Oh yeah, that was hot.
And making that print was cool. And so I did little invoices for my business on it, No,
that's neat.
But, it was ridiculous loading the tape in and then filling out the form and then printing it. And it was just a piece of, if I left the paper on my van, on the dash of my van,
forget it.
It'd disappear.
Yeah.
Because the sun bleached it out.
Yeah.
But, no, I do have all these tapes and stuff, and I've gone through a few. Remember, back in a few months ago, I picked up a demo tape for the MC. Yeah. That was one of the things I had gotten.
Neat. So you don't have any secret hidden software from your youth you could share with the
No, it's all
killer
stuff.
apps or anything.
No, it's just stuff that I could type in. And what was really cool is after you got used to the keyboard, and then I got a color computer. It was like, well, there's no control keys or
there's no shortcuts.
The controls only on one side.
Yeah, I have to straight type it in now. I was used to the,
the macro keys where you press one key to get all your basic commands. You could even get the graphics characters off of those things and stuff. Yeah, there are. Yeah. I never owned or used an MC-10 when it was a current product, but I have two in the box just because I figure I'm into collecting and I'm a CoCo collector, and like we say, it is a member of the family. It may not be the most loved member of the family, but even your drunk uncle is still family, right? So, or your annoying cousin, whatever the case may be. But I got a couple in the box. I got a good deal on them. I think I got both of them for $40 or less.
They gave you $40 to take them?
All right. And so, when you get a computer in the box with all the manuals and stuff, it's kind of neat to have. And I even got, at my first or second CoCo Fest, I went ahead and I ordered the MCX 128, which I have. And I ordered the case from John Strong, and both of them are still in the bag. So I've got my memory extender. Haven't broken the seal on that, and I haven't broken the shrink wrap on the 3D case for it, but I figure one of these days when I got nothing better to do, I'll fire up the MC-10 and the memory extender. I understand that the MCX is kind of like a drive wire for MC-10.
Yeah, it adds functionality for that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe Ron Klein has added an MC server to the CoCo Pi image, so if you wanted to, you could run like an MC-10 drive wire server off your CoCo Pi, connect it with the serial cable, and just load software to it that way.
Yeah.
At least I understand in theory that's how it's supposed to work. So.
Yeah, I had a very early version of the MCX, and there were some problems with translation and anyway, but it depends what you want. If you want quick loading of the vast game.
Well, let me run a hypothetical for it, because I go to these Florida Retro Club meetings once every couple of months. It'd be neat to show off an MC-10, because I'm sure not a lot of people have seen them. But how do you show off an MC-10 nowadays? Like what's the CoCo SDC where you can just load up software and make it easy to, demo a few programs?
Well, that would be the MCX, I suppose, in some sense. But I mean, you still have to attach the MCX to, a laptop or something like that to bit bang all the stuff down to it,
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I just generally find the simplest thing to do is just take your regular cassette black lead and just plug it into the a plug of your laptop, and then just play all of the MC-10 software that is available is in waveform. You can get it. And just load it in, because it's only going to take less than a minute to load anyway.
Oh, okay.
You get some of that. You get some of that retro thing where you have to like wait until it loads in a bit. It doesn't go super fast like the MCX will just load it in a few seconds. But Tandy machines their cassette ports were pretty good, right? They didn't make you wait for huge amounts of time. So
okay.
Did you see me load a cassette there while everybody was talking?
Well, I saw you had Brick out there or whatever.
Yeah. I loaded it. It was on the CoCo Pi. And you have two versions of the MC-10 on it, the 4K and the 20K.
Oh.
And there's software on it.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't Jim the Troll have a ROM pack for it? Wasn't there a ROM pack cartridge for it?
Yeah, somebody made ROM pack. Yeah,
is that the Troll or is it someone else?
I can't remember.
He's ask him. He's on
like a CoCo Flash for the MC-10. Does that product exist?
I think there was one, but I don't know if Jim did that one or someone else.
It wasn't me. I don't do any hardware. I can't.
Jim Brain.
If he answers back.
Oh, Jim Brain and Retro Innovations. He was in the chat.
Here he is. He smiled.
He made a smiley face. Yeah. I don't know if Jim Brain made any MC-10 peripherals.
He made this CoCo VGA, didn't he?
He didn't. No. Someone did.
He had the.
Someone
MC-10
made something so that you could replace the 16K RAM pack with just plugging in a little card with games installed on it. It was basically
It did. Ed Snyder did.
Oh, Ed Snyder did. Okay.
Yeah. You couldn't close the case.
But it's if you just want to get software in there running, I would just take the black
just
and
load
plug it in.
Load a WAV file over the cassette cables. What you're saying?
You know what? At CoCo Fest, I did the demo for Simon with my phone.
Yeah. I mean, I have on my I have a Google site with all of my programs and a bunch of the machine language games that are good, all in WAV files, and just once you can find that.
So you could actually basically go to your website, play the WAV file straight from the internet. And
that's all I do. Is
load it to your MC-10 from there.
Yeah, that's pretty much
every
what
time
I did.
make a new program, I just put it up on there and give people the link on the Facebook group, and then you can just literally just click on it, and
that's cool.
The squeals happen, and if you're plugged into a real machine, it'll just go in.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Yeah, that's an interesting distribution way of doing it there.
Yeah, and there are routines if you get the emulator, the VMC-10, that'll convert any of its kind of standard emulator files into waves, wave to MC-10. So even if you you can download, I have a distribution of the VMC-10 emulator with all of the machine language programs in its cassette directory, and all of my stuff in the cassette directory, but as .c10 files. And if you just run that utility on them, though, you can turn them into waves and then just pump them out your sound card or whatever. Yep.
Cool. All right, so we've covered some assembly, math. We've covered some. We've learned, for those who didn't know, that random numbers do not exist. We've talked about the MC-10. We've talked about a bunch of stuff, and we're now going on 2.5 hours. What else do we want to talk about? Anybody got anything else you want
to? Just going back. It is Ed Snyder. He does have some game cartridges for the MC-10, and he also has a thing called the Super Card. So I'm not sure what exactly they do, but here we go. The Super Card, 512K of SRAM, 512K of flash memory, a YM2149 programmable sound generator, 2 joystick game controller ports. Yeah, so it's a super cart for the MC-10.
Right, so that's like the that's the MCX 128 on steroids. That's kind of like his new Mega MPI with the sound card and RS-232 added in and everything. So
that's like putting a Porsche engine into a Volkswagen Beetle. Dude.
Yeah.
Looks pretty good.
And it's like other things though too. It's like what Jim was saying. The MC-10 is such a small market now. So now you create the sound card for the MC-10. Other than Jim Gerrie, who's going to develop anything?
There's a small little cadre. There's probably about 30 of us.
Okay, well that's probably bigger than we have CoCo developers right now. So,
well, I mean 30 MC-10ers, right? I mean, I don't know.
They must be just really low profile.
They do have a Facebook page.
I think there's probably like a core group of about 300 CoCoers, but there's like a core group of 30 MC-10ers on the planet.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so it's a proportionate.
Yeah.
Now, is that in third world countries?
What's that?
Is that in third world countries?
I think most of them are in. There's some in Europe and some in Australia. I take it made a little bit of a hit in Australia. The magazines for it all seem to be from Australia. That were put out.
There used to be one called Myco.
Yeah, I think that was Australian.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it must have made more of a dent there than it, and it made somewhat of a dent in Canada. I mean, there's a fair number of Quebec MC-10ers, or at least a number I've known over the years. So maybe it just didn't make the big splash in the U.S. That was the least splash it made.
How many MC-10s do you have, Jim?
I only have 2.
Oh.
But I have one that has it had a mod for a joystick. Somebody jury-rigged but the only thing is that mod only allows you in the horizontal axis, so it's a very limited joystick mod.
Space Invaders only.
Big good for Space Invaders, about it, right? So.
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, we've got a total of 24 people still watching us as it's rolling up on midnight here in Florida.
So, they're all the MC-10ers that have come out of the woodwork, yeah.
Yeah, the entire MC-10 community is here, thanks to Jim Gerrie. It's like the Pied Piper of MC-10ers.
Hey, Jim, did you see what I posted on the
Facebook?
The thing I'm playing right now.
Oh, yeah.
Global thermonuclear war.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And what's his name? The guy. Who's the guy that did? It was on earlier. He said it gave him ideas for a game.
Yeah.
Adams.
Rick
Adams.
Yeah.
Rick. Yeah. Did you just program this recently?
No, it's something I found on Hot Cocoa or something.
Oh.
Somebody. It's cool because it's all random. It's kind of like an adventure. You're going online to NORAD and they're scaring you.
When I had my MC-10 when I was back in '83, I eventually got a 300 baud modem for it, and I used to hook that thing up to computers. And one of the ones we had was a computer at the University of McMaster in Canada, and they had a nuclear reactor in that university.
Oh my God!
For isotope making, and I remember you could get pretty darn close into the system and get into functions that were dealing with that thing back then, because nobody put up any kind of defenses in the. They just used standard passwords that came with their systems and stuff like that.
Like password.
Ridiculous. But I was doing that for kind of just because that movie was so influential on us back then.
Sure.
We all wanted to kind of crack systems like that. But
all right, war dialing. So I just want to
war dialing.
Just getting into our telethon here. We have reached every emotion on Facebook. We've reached all the emojis, and we've actually gone into the multiple. So we've got 2 likes, 2 loves, 1 haha, 1 wow, 1 sad, and 2 angries. So we've run the full emotional spectrum here on Facebook. So I want to thank everybody for having some type of emotional connection with our show, either positive or negative. And Steve Bjork says that for every positive feedback he gets, he's going to match that in Bitcoin. So
Oh, no. I said negative. I said for the angry.
Oh, for the angry. Well, we got 2 angries now. All right,
Yeah.
so we got 2 angries. So there we go. He's going to match the angries. Mike Craig just joined us on Facebook and says that this show beats anything on TV. Well, you got to get a better television.
That's not hard.
Hey. You got to remember, sweeps are over with. We're now into the dull summer where it's nothing but stupid
Reruns.
game shows.
Oh my God! It's World Cup time. What are you talking about, Gee?
This is
World
the
Cup?
TMZ of CoCo.
Come
You
on.
forget we're Americans.
Kinda
We don't know anything about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Whenever they say
you're lucky.
football, we get confused.
Hey, look,
Yeah.
when they finally decided to do it over here, it took 3 countries to do soccer. Not what? Mexico, Canada, and the U.S.
We can't trade together, but we can play soccer together, Al. It's ironic. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, when we listen, I'm from Miami, and we got a hockey team in like '95. We got the Florida Panthers, and this is a state that's never seen snow. And, but they basically imported a bunch of Canadians. So our Florida Panthers team was all imported Canadians. And what do we know about playing hockey here in Florida?
Florida has seen snow.
Oh yeah, well it was like frost on the window in the 70s.
Yeah.
I was there. So Rob Inman says that this show is longer than the Academy Awards, yet shorter than a Jerry Lewis telethon.
But all of them have hot air. So
Oh. Yes. So there we go.
and they have an MC that sucks.
Like the MC-10?
Oh, he's a 10.
MC-10 joke?
That MC's a 10.
How did the MC-10 get its name?
The one theory is that somebody told me was that if you measure it from corner to corner, perpendicularly across the machine, it's 10 inches or something like that.
Okay. Well, we know the MC stands for microcolor.
Yeah.
But 10, as it you can speculate how much it's worth in pennies.
Well, it was explained
how
to
many months
me.
it lasted on the market.
Yeah. How many seconds? Yeah.
What, Steve?
Do you have insider knowledge on this, Steve?
Yeah, I do. It's very simple. You had CoCo 1, CoCo 2, eventually CoCo 3, right? Well, they wanted to have a little gap in numbers. So they call it an MC-10, figuring they had enough gap.
So it would have been MC-10, 20, and 30 if it had developed.
Hey, look, Apple did it. They had the Apple 8 and the Apple 10. They wanted a little gap in there because the 10 is supposedly 2 years into the future.
All right. It's kind of like how the versions of Windows. We went from Vista, and we went from XP to Vista to 7 to 8 to 10. So however that works.
9.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a Windows 7 in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
7, 8, 10.
Yeah, so I don't know.
I think it had to do something with graphics or graphic modes or something like that, if I remember.
Hey, was there any other computers in between everything that never made it? Like, between the 1000 and, the Model 1, 3, 4, was there any other ones out there?
Well, there's the Model 12.
Yeah.
16.
Oh, it made
And
it.
16,
but,
yeah.
But there was no other ones that got started and it stopped that were
Aborted from 10?
Well, the 2000 was.
Yeah, the 2000 didn't make it.
Well, maybe the next closest one would be the 64K White CoCo 1. It had a 6-month lifespan, right? But because it didn't. But that's part of the CoCo line. So the CoCo line didn't go away, but that model did. TDP
But they didn't
100.
try 6502 at Tandy.
Oh no. They would never have gone with that chip for anything.
It makes you wonder why, because wasn't that cheaper? And wasn't Tandy all about saving money?
They're getting good deals from
Motorola.
Yeah. Because they're buying in large enough quantity.
Okay.
I mean, the reason why Steve Jobs used the 6502 and the Apple One was simply he was given the chip. That was good for the company.
Yeah, 83, 84 was like the apogee of, or the golden time for Tandy, and that ever after that, Tandy mainly became more of a follower than a leader than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And once IBM came into the thing, that kind of changed the playing field.
Right.
Yeah. Kind of makes you want to live in the world of CoCo forever, where we could maybe.
Hey, Steve, were you
back.
surprised when IBM left and kind of let their PCs go to Lenovo?
No, because IBM was now set up strictly to do mainframe server operations. And of course, now they've sold their servers to Lenovo. So they're concentrating mostly on software. And tell you the honest truth, software, when you can control it and there's no piracy, has a greater profit potential than hardware.
Yeah, but have you seen their software?
Well, considering I know several IBM software engineers, and I know they're good, and yes, I would say I have, and most of it's very good. Yeah.
Does anybody remember OS2?
Yep.
OS2 is still around. In fact, there's another company called, was it Blue something? The Arca OS. Anyway, they're still making patches to it so it'll run on the modern hardware because there's still companies that use OS2.
Yeah,
And will
mainly.
not switch.
Yeah,
Banks
banking. Yeah,
and insurance.
Yep, they were
ATMs.
trying to take the stuff back from Microsoft. They were also the microchannel architecture was their hardware attempt to take back what the PC was. They were, hey, you guys could use our microchannel stuff, but you got to pay us to license it.
And a royalty.
And
microchannel MC.
MCA, actually, microchannel architecture.
Yep. It wasn't actually that bad of an architecture, but the thing is, very quickly, the industry got together and started improving the architecture, and they've done a pretty good job.
Right, because that's PCI became the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, ESA first. ESA.
Oh, and the extended ISA architecture. EISA?
Yeah.
Right.
So
then VESA.
Yeah, didn't microchannel come from like their mini computers? Wasn't that bus already out there with some of their mid-sized machines, not their big irons?
Yeah, a little bit of that, but it was also they were working very closely with Intel on developing the architecture to a certain degree.
All right, but I think the microchannel was going to allow for self-configurable appliances like the predecessor to plug and play, where you didn't have to have jumpers and things like that, right? So
yeah, the biggest problem IBM hardware back in those days is you had to configure the interrupts.
Okay. It was a 32-bit bus too, right?
Yeah. See, now we're looking at 2-bit, 4-bit, 16-bit buses, but because of the way they're designed, you're looking at gigabit transfer rates.
All right. We just got a happy Father's Day wish from my friend Dan Shepard in Florida. It's almost midnight, so yeah, it's almost Father's Day.
Mm-hmm.
So to all you fathers, basically everyone who's a father is a mother effer. So
and then Hill went.
Yeah. So yeah, basically the IBM brand of personal computers. Like Lenovo was like the name for their laptops when it was still being made by IBM at a time, right?
Well, it's just that Lenovo was contracted by IBM to make their equipment, and eventually they just sold their technology to Lenovo.
And the name.
Okay, and now it is overseas too. So Lenovo is.
Is that South Korea?
No, China.
China.
Well, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they also own Motorola, or the parts of it that Google sold off.
Yeah. Cool. Well, what have we not talked about tonight?
Motherboard lines. You know, on motherboards where they have the lines coming off chips and stuff. Isn't there pretty much a limit as to how much speed they can have for a bus because of the physical lines on a motherboard?
Well, you just design it so that you have less capacitance. Less capacitance means you can switch the lines faster, and voila, you got a faster machine. That was the whole idea behind PCI, was to make the line simpler and shorter and less capacitance, and they could get the speeds that they needed.
Well, also the EPCI is a lot fewer lines too, isn't it? I mean, their slots are tiny.
Right.
But I think getting to Ron's question though, when it comes to these circuit traces, there is a law of physics, right, where you can only go so fast, and I think one of the challenges too is not only the speed, but when you have these lines very close together, you start to generate this RF noise in the motherboard, and they can start to crosstalk or mess each other up if they're going too fast.
Actually, it's the capacitance.
So
the closer, you see, the thicker the wire is, or the closer the wire is to another one that's part of its pair, will increase the capacitance. And the higher the capacitance, the slower the signal is going to go through. So that's actually how a capacitor works. You've got these itty-bitty capacitors that can't handle much voltage, but what it is the elements inside there are so close together that actually creates greater capacitance than having them further apart. And so it's the issue is capacitance. If you have great amount of capacitance, you have to send more electrons through to change the state of the wire.
So there's a science in making up motherboards, isn't there?
Oh, yes.
Some electrical engineering has to go on there, right? So,
Speaking of traces, I think I fried my CoCo 2 the other day. Is anyone still repairing those things?
Yeah.
Jim Bryan.
Richard Lorbieski, our resident Muppet here. So.
Yep.
And was Paul T. Barton? Well, if he has to, he'll just run a wire on top of the motherboard. He's done that too, where he's actually retraced the traces with the physical wire and just soldered the two ends of it on. So,
what kind of CoCo is it? What kind of CoCo 2 is it?
It's a CoCo 2B Korean, I think, with
2B or not to be.
Yeah, you think it's the motherboard itself, or what does it do?
Yeah, it got left on for like a week, and I don't know what happened. I think I probably blew a chip or something.
Does it power on at all, or?
It does, but the screen is garbled in some way or another.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to suggest that you could ship either the board itself, or if you want to ship the entire computer, you could do it either way.
To who?
But see, the thing is, when Richard works on it, it's going to come back really good because he's going to remember to put the ground plane back on.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That too.
That's Richard Lorbieski?
Richard Lorbieski of Boyson Technologies.
Yep. He spent the entire CoCo Fest fixing people's CoCos.
Yeah.
So there's maybe hope to bring it back from the dead.
Oh, of course.
Yes.
And would you take stuff from Canada and ship it back, or?
Oh yeah. It's all the way to Canada. Yeah.
All the way to Canada. No, not halfway. Meet him in the middle.
Okay, that's good to know. I'll think about it.
Yeah, if the best way of doing it well, It can, if it powers up.
Yep.
So it's not an electrical problem. So the transformer and all that's okay. I would just take it out of the case and just ship the motherboard itself because it'd be much cheaper.
Yeah, less weight.
Less weight. Well, the thing is, like in the United States, I can ship it flat rate. I can ship it in a flat rate box, and on international rates, and it's like $22-$23.
And that's without the power supply. Would not necessarily go with it.
Well, it's the case that takes up the extra room.
Right.
Okay, so it's just the case that you're getting rid of.
Right. The case and the
Power
transformer
supply and keyboard.
Yeah.
And the keyboard.
And
Now,
the keyboard, so you have
before you ship it, if you've got any chips and
Static back.
sockets, go through
just lift them
and
out.
push them all the way down. That's the first thing to try.
Yeah.
Then
Okay.
try pulling them out and putting them back in to clean the oxide buildup.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But you got to be very careful if you pull them out, put them back in, that you don't bend a pin. So easy to do.
Do you have an IC puller?
No. And I don't have a Radio Shack anymore to go buy that stuff anymore. So.
Yeah, I got mine on eBay. Got an IC puller.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't usually use an IC puller. They have a chip. It's like a flat blade screwdriver, but it has a little hook in it, a flat hook, and that's what I usually use to take chips out.
It's like a tiny pry bar. It's got a little curve on it.
But but what you do is you pry one end 1/8 of an inch, then you pry the other end 1/8 of an inch, and you keep going back and forth. Don't try and pull the thing out completely in one shot, because then it'll come up at an angle, and you've definitely bent the pins.
Right.
Yeah,
What usually happens to me is it pops out and then rotates 90 degrees and stabs my thumb. Unfortunately, I've done that more than a few times.
Well, I'll maybe try to reseat the ones that are. There's not too many that are socketed on there, I don't think, but.
Yes, but it was. I guess maybe it was last year. I had a CoCo 3 that had an issue, and I had Richard Lorbieski on, and I forgot who else was on. Sockmaster was on.
Sockmaster.
And you guys were talking me through, try this, try that. It ended up being just a loose RAM chip. But after we had fixed it and it booted up, and I reseated this was the 512K RAM, which is really easy to reseat on a CoCo 3. Richard's like, yeah, just do a drop test. Just lift it up about 1.5 feet off the desk and just drop it. And I'm like, okay, I did. You're the expert. And I did it.
And it broke.
Actually, it was 6 inches.
6 inches. That's what she said. But yeah.
And that's we did that in the factory when we did the Model 3s. We lifted them up a couple of inches and we dropped them because just to make sure there was nothing loose inside the machine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other trick too on the reseating is only bring it up about half the length of the pin itself, and then push it back in, because that'll usually do enough to clean it.
So you think it could be an oxide problem? But I did leave it on for it got left on a week or more, maybe. Could that?
Yeah, it could be heat buildup. Yeah, it could have been. Who knows?
There's a guy.
Fried a chip or.
There's a guy I know that had his computer on for over 2 or 3 years continuously, and it never ruined anything.
Well, the thing, though, is we're talking about old machines that have electrolytic capacitors in there.
Yeah.
And even the discs, after years, they can start getting a little weak.
Breaking down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tom C. does this for a living, and he says he does drop tests, too. I remember back in the day when we used to build PCs in the late 80s, we had the burn-in test where we would build it and we let it run for 24 hours because I figured if anything was going to fail, RAM chip or something else, it would fail in that first 24 hours. And if it didn't fail then, it was probably good. The
Model 3 had actually 2 burn-in tests, or actually all the Radio Shack ones. They would burn the motherboard in first, and then when that passed, usually it was 12 to 16 hours. Okay. Then they would put it in a machine, and then they would burn it in overnight as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I would do burn-in tests, I always did it in a warm room because that put extra stress on the machine.
Okay.
Oh, it was warm in the factory because we had 300-400 of them burning in at one time. And what was really funny, it was close to quitting time, and they didn't have battery backup at that time, and they had a thunderstorm go through. All the power got cut off. So did all the computers. So they had to redo all those computers again, the burn-in test.
Mm-hmm.
Then they finally got smart and said, hey, I think we need to get a backup generator.
Oh, so well, Tom C says if you do a drop test and you've got a crappy socket, it'll show up. So
right.
Crappy By the way, sockets or electrolytic capacitors too.
Speaking of power problems and like that, not too long ago, they had a power outage up at the knoll for the internet that was near Northern California, one of the universities. And
like May West, San Jose,
yeah, something like that. And there was backup generators that were supposed to kick in. They hadn't been testing them regularly. And guess what? The entire knoll access to California died for about 6 hours until they were able to rebuild the generator. Because good old Pacific Gas and Electric had a major outage in the area. And it's just like, okay, guys, it's not good enough to have a generator. You got to test the frickin' thing once in a while.
Hey, when they separate California out, which part will you be in?
California's not going to get separated.
I know.
The only state that is allowed to separate itself in the union is Texas. Any other state that wants to be separated, they have to go through an awful lot of stuff to happen. Which includes the others.
Yeah, actually, there was another one. There was Virginia. Civil War, parts of West Virginia did not succeed.
Right. But I'm just saying is Texas was big enough that they demanded and they allowed it. So they could do a referendum in the state and have multiple states out of it. All the other states, you got to get approval from the other states. So it ain't going to happen in California. Besides,
Ron's still hoping for that oceanfront property.
Yeah, I'm waiting. I'm ready.
Besides, California, Southern California is too dependent on water from Northern California. Northern California is too dependent on the tax base from Southern California. So it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, and then Ron's going to rename the city Otisville, right?
Yep.
Oh man. What else, dude? It's after midnight now. We've been doing this for 3 hours. Have we done it? Have we beat it to death?
We're 10 after 9 here.
Oh yeah.
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 One after 1 here.
Yeah.
Well, he's unusual. He's in a state that doesn't believe in daylight savings time.
That's right.
Yeah.
So he's on California time right now.
My alarm clock has, the moon, has the time zones and stuff and everything, and it's an hour behind. I set it correctly, and then it does its own thing.
Oh, because it wants to automatically adjust for daylight savings.
Yeah.
Isn't there a daylight savings time switch you could flip?
No, because it's a cheap clock.
Well,
that was made by Tandy.
Get a right one.
Yeah.
It was made by Tandy.
It's an Optimus.
Tell me why did Tandy do that?
Too much.
For $2 more, I could have had that probably, right?
Yeah.
No, my clock is on WWV, and it's fine with the settings and like that, but it also would work fine in your state too.
We're holding strong to our emotions. So we've been holding our emotions, so that's good. We have 2 angries, so Steve promised a matching on that. So we're gonna match anger with anger.
Keep it all bottled up inside.
Yes. Yeah, I do see Zach's on in the background there. This whole time. Is that being played on a switcheroo?
It is. It's just in the demo mode. I just put something else on there other than just random characters.
Hey, you don't play credits on After Dark, do you?
I don't have the same credits. I have a different credit thing. Was there one you'd like to see?
No, I was just thinking we have another half hour yet, right?
Yeah.
No, we don't.
No, we can pull the plug on this at any given time.
Okay. I've got a question for Jason, actually.
Okay, right. Go ahead.
On a PAL CoCo, what does the switch do on the switcheroo?
It makes a clicking noise.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to the clicking noise.
That's one of the commercials that his brother made, is that artifact colors do not work in Australia. Hashtag irony.
I was hoping it would give me some composite colors or artifact colors, yeah.
No, you'd actually need, you would, now I've heard from Nick, if you have an NTSC CoCo, you can get artifact colors, but it won't work coming out of a PAL CoCo.
All right. Yeah, I'm still going to get an NTSC one.
Just about all TVs now made handle both PAL and NTSC, so the problem's not the TV anymore.
Yep.
It's the source machine. In other words, you've got to have an NTSC capable CoCo to see artifacting.
Yeah. And like I don't have a PAL television, but I've got analog capture devices, so I could view a PAL source through my capture device and view it on my PC, for example.
Mm-hmm. But
maybe you're calling it wrong.
You don't see any artifacting though.
Well, if PAL doesn't support it, then I suppose I wouldn't. No,
it'll be a black and white, or you might see the purple and green stripes at best.
Okay.
I shipped them their first artifacting game, which was Popcorn.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear I could just hear these guys back at Tandy hitting their heads against the wall going, there's no black, white, red, blue mode. The mode does not exist. And I could just see them, because they kept on saying, how in the hell did you do that? I go, it's in the machine. Of course, nobody checked to see if it would work on the PAL version.
Now, back then, that was a very early game for Tandy, because I know most of the newer ones, you can press the clear key to change to a different color set. Did that support that feature too? Or was that before?
No. That was before that.
Yeah.
Because Tandy hadn't started developing a PAL system quite yet when I delivered the game. Because it was fall of 80 when that cartridge went in.
What does PAL stand for?
Phase alternate something or other, I think. Yeah.
Maybe they should have called it Buddy.
Yeah, its bandwidth is higher than NTSC, and that's why the better bandwidth means better clarity of the image and like that, but also it can't take the disruption that the artifacting mode does and do the same imagery. So it's kind of like the difference between Betamax and VHS. Well, PAL was just a little bit better quality.
All right, Jim says it's phase alternating line. Jim Brain from Retro Innovations. Yeah.
NTSC, never the same color twice.
Never the same color twice. Yeah.
Do you think
actually it stands for the National Television Standards Committee?
Right, but
but it really stands for never the same color twice.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Is there ever going to be a standard for color in TVs, or is there now?
Well,
there's always been a standard. PAL is a standard. NTSC is a standard.
Well, what
They're
I mean
all
is,
standards.
There's a blue temperature or a blue color. There's a yellow color. There's all these strict, so that if you have one, how they used to take TVs and put them all together to make one big screen, but they would never look right because they were all
they're not all calibrated.
Yeah.
They're not all that's the thing is, you can get your modern digital TV calibrated and it'll be right, but you just got to make sure that you get a TV that doesn't drift, and which costs money, and you got to pay for somebody to come in and do it. And I know people that make a living on it. And for them to walk in, it can be upwards $1,500 for them to tune your TV.
Yeah, and you can actually buy things like that you attach to your TV to calibrate the color. Things like a spider or I'm sure there's a few other brands. Yeah, the standard is pretty well locked down now. There's a lot of options, but when you get it mastered in Hollywood, it's going to look right.
Yeah, well, when I worked for Individual Effects, we had a line of monitors that were called HP Dream Colors. And anybody who was doing anything that required color consistency, so the matte painters and people who did textures and stuff, so it had to be the same across the board. So once every 30 days or so, we had to run around and calibrate these. And there was a separate laptop that we ran, and we had this little puck that would stick onto the screen, and the laptop would run software and run it through, generating various colors, and then the puck would read how the colors were displayed based on what was sent to them, and it would recalibrate the color engines. And we had to do this on a fairly regular basis because they would drift from that calibration over time too. And we actually had to calibrate it in the area that the artist was working, so the color was right for that space. Because most of them like to work in the dark, so it was like going down these caves and everything. So those monitors were very expensive, and that process was fairly time-consuming. It would take, sometimes a half hour to run through all the calibrations. So we typically had one already on a cart that was already pre-calibrated, so we dropped one off for them, and then while we were sitting there, we would calibrate the other one, and and keep swapping them out and stuff. But that was a constant cycle that we went through, was calibrating those things. And there was a whole separate one for the projectors in the screening rooms where we had to run through software for these. We had these 4K Christie projectors that actually projected stereo. And we were, because we were doing 3D type stuff too. So calibrating the color on that was a big pain in the arse too.
Yeah.
So, but that's not a consumer type thing for the most part.
Nope.
Well, the technology has reached the average consumer. I mean, you can get one of these pucks for under a few $100, $200-300 for a high-end one. In regards to consumer level stuff, I mean, you can go up to a couple grand if you're a professional photographer. Well, but it's all within reach.
When the Blockbuster video stores were in business, they would rent calibration equipment. The consumer could go in, they'd get a DVD and a puck, and they could calibrate the set themselves.
Oh, interesting. You could actually rent that out. Maybe that was a West Coast thing. I don't ever remember seeing that on the East Coast, so Southeast anyways.
It was in the stores that were in major population centers.
Okay.
So it, like where you're at, Miami, Orlando might be the only two that would have the product.
Yeah,
and not every store carry it. But here in Los Angeles, more stores seem to carry it because there is more people interested in getting color adjustment.
Sure.
I've got to go now, guys. So
yeah,
so I
go too.
I think we need to go, all of us.
All right.
All right.
Fair enough.
Okay, I'll see you all next week.
Yeah, sounds good. Happy Father's Day to everyone, to all you mother effers out there.
There's always got to be one.
We don't get our Father's Day till
There's
September.
always got to be one.
Always got one in every crowd.
Yeah.
Well, this was a good talk tonight. We talked about a lot of things. And
tonight, it may be some we shouldn't have.
Yes. And so I want to say thank you to everybody who's still here. So Eric Canales is still here, Mark Overholser, Steve Bjork. We just lost James Gerrie, Nick Marentes, Jason the CoCo Man, Richard Lorbieski, our resident Muppet, Brian Joyce, Ron Delvaux. Earlier on the call, we also had Rick Adams. Who else did we have on the call that we may have? I can't keep track. I'm punch drunk tired. Yeah. And we got a bunch of people in the live chat. So Dan Shepard was here, Mikey was here, Retro Innovations has been here, Tom C has been here, Mike Craig was here, Retro Innovations, Hajas Andres was here, Rob Inman was here, Richard Lorbieski was here, Tom C, Mark Overholser, all kinds of people in the live chat. So yeah, I think we were up to like about 24 people watching us live late at night. So that's pretty good. So this video will be for replay on both YouTube and Facebook. So I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yep.
Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you again at some point in time. This has been a CoCoTALK production, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Good night, all.
Bye, y'all.
Good
Bye.
night.
Good
Bye.
night. Good night.
Push the button, Frank.
Bye.
Sayonara.
That's a wrap.
That was pretty freaking loud, wasn't it? But it was still, it's an awesome track. So we might want.
Jamming.
It was
Do it
jamming.
again.
The audience is
Do it
now
again.
deaf.
Yeah.
CoCoTALK After Dark.
After dark.
CoCoTALK After Dark.
After dark.
All right. Let's beat this one to death, guys. All right. Good night.